5-year investigation into the mysterious brain injuries known as Havana syndrome. Injuries were reported by the White House staff, FBI agents, CIA and military officers, and their families. Last week, the House Intelligence Committee published the results of its new investigation that indicates many of the Havana syndrome cases were attacks committed by a foreign adversary. That contradicts what the intelligence community, led by the CIA, has been saying for years. The congressional report went further, accusing the intelligence community of obstructing its investigation. The report also referenced our story, Targeting Americans, when military investigator Greg Edgreen said he had seen evidence of who was behind Havana syndrome.
Are we being attacked?
My personal opinion, yes.
By whom?
Russia.
My name is Len Baer. I'm formerly a physician from the USSR, from the former USSR. I specialized in. I was a medical doctor, specialized in endocrinology. Came over here in '93 to work for a pharmaceutical company, and in the area of my research. And then I was prepared to get licensed in the States, but things on the business side took over, and I stayed on the business side, and currently working in the regulatory field for a company in Chicago area. U.S. naturalized citizen, married, and been target of directed energy weapons since 2019.
Since 2019?
Yeah, in the summer of 2019.
3 years ago.
Just over 3 years ago, it started happening to me. It was diagnosed in 2020 with vestibular dysfunction due to directed energy exposure by the same team of experts that diagnosed Cuban diplomats.
Imagine the implications of a weapon with no visible trace, a weapon that could knock out tanks, ships, and planes as fast as the speed of light. The same technology with modifications could disorient and even tranquilize military personnel, rendering them virtually helpless in the battle zone. These are the new weapons of war we will examine in this series. For the past 40 years, the world has been riveted by the threat of nuclear war, and more recently by the prospect of space defenses using lasers and other modern technologies. But while both sides at the Geneva summit will be focusing on these matters, progress is being made in even newer weapons that could render any arms agreement relatively useless. Lightning is the most dramatic form of energy to be found in nature. Scientists have succeeded in creating limited types of artificial lightning, and some think that these could be the forerunners of a new type of directed energy weapon, part of a family of weapons which operate within the radio frequency segment of the electromagnetic spectrum, and are thus referred to as radio frequency weapons. Dr. James Frazier has researched electromagnetic effects for the Air Force for over 10 years, and he, like a small but growing number of weapons experts, feels that radio frequency, or RF weapons, could be the wild card in the ongoing arms race.
You could have tremendous amounts of radiative power, and what you did with that power then is a matter of engineering design and what your goal is.
Robert Bass, a physicist and PhD in mathematics, is working on U.S. weapons research. He says that the Soviets seem to be ahead in a number of areas, and especially in RF weapons.
We are behind the Soviet Union in directed energy weapons based on 60 gigahertz microwave beams.
Dr. Bass and others feel the most likely form of Soviet RF weaponry would be high-powered microwaves, similar to a focused, ultra-high-intensity radar beam. It would literally cook humans and knock out computers and electronic surveillance and communications gear. An operational RF weapon, relatively cheap and reusable, could devastate sophisticated and expensive war machinery. The $20 million F-16 fighter, for example, is totally controlled through electronic sensors and computers. With no manual flight controls, the plane would literally fall out of the sky after being hit with a high-intensity pulse of microwave radiation. Scientists say that microwaves and other types of RF pulses operating at specific frequencies or windows can be transmitted with little or no loss of power. Machines known as gyrotrons can produce the massive pulses needed to drive these devices, and it's believed that the Soviet Union has a 3 to 5 year lead in this technology. Over the past year, CNN has repeatedly asked the Department of Defense and the Air Force about radio frequency weapons. After much resistance, DoD finally said that the subject was too sensitive to discuss. In my next report, unexplained cloud-like phenomena which may be evidence of a Soviet breakthrough in RF technology. Chuck J. Caro, CNN Special Assignment.
I have an Ivy League background, education. I've been studying human rights activism for what is now currently termed Havana Syndrome, but this has been going on for quite some time. I worked for DARPA on projects for the CIA, for the Navy, for example, wrote the Artificial Intelligence Code, tracked the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet. But about 20 years ago, I realized some of my research was being utilized on my own citizens, and that was unacceptable to me. And since then, I've done hundreds of interviews, interviewed 2,500 victims or targeted individuals, as they're called, found commonalities of all their stories, and I've spoken to with the head of the LA FBI, to the Senate Intelligence Committee, 23 senators and representatives, with some interest. And I said, just wait when it starts happening to their agents, diplomats, and the FBI. So interestingly, a story came out yesterday that it's happening to the FBI now.
What is your educational background?
I have an MBA from Dartmouth, and Masters of Science from Harvard, PhD in Applied Sciences, Computer Science, Artificial Intelligence, pre-medical in engineering, and other classes from Stanford, Duke, and MIT. So, yeah, I've been in school most of my life.
Industry specialist who worked for a private security company in Seattle, Washington. I am no longer employed by this company. I chose to leave because I could no longer in good conscience work for a corrupt company that is involved in a highly illegal federal program that is blatantly violating the constitutional rights of American citizens on a daily basis.
The military, they pioneered the internet, DARPA, and now they are pioneering our interface to our brain.
For that, we really need to measure every neuron and at appropriate speeds and long periods of time. And that's what the BRAIN Initiative is about.
They asked us to go and measure the activity in a living brain and map exhaustively the wiring diagram of every neuron connecting to every other neuron.
And we're, as part of the BRAIN Initiative, thinking about the Rosetta Brain, where we're not picking one particular winning technology. We're trying to stimulate new innovative technologies and to integrate them all into one brain and do that over and over again in different brains, in different pathological settings in humans.
And then from there, IARPA wants us to deliver the brain up to the cloud. So this is a 40 gigabit per second brocade switch to the Internet 2 infrastructure. So this is like the fast internet. And we upload that brain to the cloud.
And here's a laundry list of the types of bytes that we need to store this information. If you're interested in brain uploading and downloading, these are the kind of absolute minimum numbers that you need to be considering. But it's not out of range. It's not necessarily far off in the future.
And if you think the internet is big, if you think blockchain is big, this is going to blow it all away. Because there's nothing bigger than connecting our minds to the internet.
I find it interesting that that's what's going on. That's what they're admitting. They're saying, hey, this Microns project is going straight to the source. We're not taking it from the global internet perspective. We're taking it from the brain itself. And eventually, those two things will merge. So the public announcement of a project like this is pretty telling about where we are.
It's so funny because the military contacted me and asked if I would help them. And I'm reluctant to do that because I like talking about everything. And it would be top secret, whatever they told me. So it's like, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas, but I don't want to know what you're doing because I only want to know it's public. So this is public. But how they're doing it is not public. And the different applications for it on the battlefield are not public.
It is with laws that protect whistleblowers in mind that I am choosing to make this information available to the public. By doing so, I hope to put pressure on those in power in this country to investigate those involved in this social engineering program and bring them to justice.
There are new technologies, and a lot of them are being developed by startups and the military that are going to allow us to much more accurately measure and actually communicate with your brain. Now, the nice thing about this technology is it's non-invasive, meaning they don't have to crack open your skull and put a chip inside.
The true way that this technology works is that a complete DNA profile is obtained from the target, from the individual, the targeted individual. And then this information, the DNA of the individual, is used to determine the resonant frequency of the DNA itself. The resonant frequency is then used to fine-tune the technology, the radio frequency signals, the microwave auditory effect, and all of the other aspects of the technology to tune it perfectly to the resonant frequency of the targeted individual's DNA. And they can read your thoughts verbatim as they occur within your own mind.
We can generate an electronic signal that's characteristic for the DNA. This can read DNA from solution, and your blood is a solution, it's a liquid. We can decode it into a form that can be read by a computer. And in a way, you can think about DNA as digital information moving through a tube. Now, if we can tap into that tube, like a network, and we can read that information, we can intercept what's happening in people, you can make them an extension of the internet. And you know, I have a thermostat at home that's on my iPad. I can warm the house up before I get home. People call that the Internet of Things. We call this the Internet of Living Things.
Much like any information, biometric information, digital information can be susceptible. We know that genetic information and DNA sequencing information is highly sought after by adversaries.
The memo says the kits could expose personal and genetic information and potentially create unintended security consequences and increased risk. It also says the data in the wrong hands could be used to conduct mass surveillance or to track individuals.
There are many military applications for maintaining and using DNA data sets. There are new technologies that are coming out.
Technology called biocoded directed energy. And that's a top secret thing that was developed. And what it is they get your DNA. Once they have your DNA, they take the DNA and they put your DNA code in a supercomputer. And in that supercomputer, they run algorithms that biocode electromagnetic transmissions so they bioresonate with your body. Once they've done that, they can transmit that from satellites or cell towers or aircraft or any number of ways, and that signal will only affect you and nobody else. In other words, everybody standing next to you is not going to hear the content because their receiver is not tuned to that bioresonance.
There's a bioresonance to every individual, just like our fingerprint. Every person has an individual DNA, a different bioresonance. And so the original Stocklin patent is on my website, where Stocklin was able to go voice to skull with pulse transmissions in 92. And then after the rest of the development went black ops. We don't really know what happened after that. We knew we could put voices in group people's heads. What they did, and I know from the Russian translation from Cheryl Welch, from reading all her translated psychotronic stuff from Russia, that they figured out how to biocode these microwaves so that it can attack specific individuals.
They basically analyze your DNA and they then use supercomputers to encode the signals.
And you basically convert DNA information into ionic information into computer information. So that's going from DNA to ions, but for the brain, we're interested in the opposite, going from ions to DNA. We have the ion channels that are going through the the spiking, or in some cases, the non-spiking behavior. It's influencing the fidelity of the DNA polymerase so that the time series of the calcium, say, turns into a spatial series of changes in the DNA sequence which you can then read out or compute on. And not just for the RNAs and other molecular identifiers, but what the brain was thinking during activity.
All of us speak to ourselves in our head. That's how it's strange that we have to communicate to ourselves by speaking, right? But we will just sit there talking to ourselves. So as we are talking, there's a certain pattern for every word we say. What they're doing is looking at the pattern in the brain, and then they're matching that pattern, they're putting that into a database. If you think of those words, and the beauty of this is most of the words in the dictionary we don't say, but a subset of these words, actually a small subset, we use all the time. So if you can match the patterns in somebody's brain to the patterns in the database, you can literally start to read their mind. Every time a word comes up, you know it. Oh, that word came up for that individual. Now, will the patterns be identical in every person? Probably not, though the information will be stored in slightly different places. But it wouldn't take long for you to train a machine to read your mind. Now, that's just the beginning. They may be able to have algorithms sophisticated enough, and they get enough samples, enough data, that the AI could actually learn over time what the general rules are for different words, and then you could apply it to anybody. Without verbalizing anything, you could literally start to communicate with other people. So my lecture, we could all be standing here silently. And I could just be communicating it to you. I could be talking, you would talk to people, you could literally have conversations with people without ever getting on your phone anywhere in the world. Goodbye WeChat or Google Hangouts. We could all just be on our brainwaves, right? Communicating with our friends, they could be dropping in on us. Very strange if we think about it.
So that when that person goes to speak out about it, when they go to seek help from their fellow human beings, and their fellow human beings say, what is it that's happening to you? The target will then say, I'm hearing voices inside my head.
But these would be controlled hallucinations run by algorithms.
And they will conclude that this person must be crazy. And as a result, they will recommend psychological evaluation for that person. You can see the way this is going to go, and the way it is going right now. As good people, helpless people that are being abused and tortured and enslaved and experimented upon in America today, American citizens cry out for help from their fellow Americans, and their fellow Americans say, why don't you take some Prozac because we think you're schizophrenic? When this is a highly technical program. All of the symptoms are induced by a technology that is so fucking sophisticated, it is horrifying beyond description. This technology can also tap into the optical nerve of the target and the auditory system of the target, so that those monitoring the target can see what the target is seeing and hear what the target is hearing. This information is then downloaded and stored on a computer in a highly secure, classified site on servers that are guarded by some of the tightest security in the world.
So the ability to do this, the ability to download information, that is like what the military and other people are that's their holy grail.
There's a number of companies now that are looking at ways to write digital information into DNA. Because you would only need about a room full of DNA to record all of the digital data that exists today, which is quite extraordinary.
So we'll be able to outsource, we'll be able to upload our memories to the cloud. So let's say you don't want to, you want that memory forever, right? You're like, it's automatically probably being stored in the cloud for you without you thinking about it. Just like these automatic backups on your computer, everything, there's a copy and there's redundancy and there's like many versions. And so your experience, you could access it later.
This results in the individual's entire day, everything they see, everything they hear, everything they experience, and everything they feel being recorded till the end of time.
Within the brain, there are tiny structures called microtubules, right? If you think of these as straws, but they're straws through which flows light. And in fact, photons of light known as biophotons. And that each one of these is a package of information that flows around, these tiny structures in the brain. This light is carrying across the memories. And we know DNA is also producing these biophotons of light. This is well studied and is well understood. So the interface between the brain and the DNA would therefore be these biophotons.
Now this is where, if you can transfer knowledge and you can communicate, because your brain is wirelessly connected to the internet, there's no reason you couldn't extract memories, which are just data, out of one brain and put them in another brain. Now, what would it mean to share memories? All of a sudden, Elon Musk, you want to know what he's thinking? You could get his memories from yesterday and live his entire day.
Although the connectivity of the brain is where we are processing experiences, even utilizing recalled memories and writing new memories to the hard drive, that it's more like a RAM with a random access memory rather than being the hard drive. The DNA would be effectively our hard drive where all the bulk of the information we're not using is being written to. So it could be that in the future that we'll find a way to download people into DNA and move them across into other bodies. So this is an astonishing step forward in these kind of science fiction type ideas.
When our brains are connected to the internet, our physical bodies become less important. Now, think about that. If our brains are connected to the internet, and if our brains are all connected, all of us connected, I could literally go into your head and see through your eyes. So all of a sudden, for a day, a lot of us, because you're entrepreneurs, think it would be cool to go inside Elon Musk's head for a day and walk around. Well, Elon Musk may allow people to get that feed and literally live through what he sees.
Because of my responsibilities in surveillance as a otherwise normal security specialist, I was showed this technology at work. And it was through the perspective, of course, of the camera, and what I was told that it was obvious it was being used through the eyes of the targets. So I have seen it, and it is absolutely remarkable. It's just like a first-person, video game or something where you see right through the eyes of the individual. And so there's two aspects to the technology. Number one, there is the actual, what is essentially receiving the signal from the individual themselves. And that signal, it goes on within the human mind. I'm not going to get into exactly how the entire human brain works, but basically those optical signals are interpreted by the brain, and then you perceive them as vision. You perceive them as pictures and so forth, but this is all electrical signals within the brain. And so the exact same thing, the data is taken in through the eyes, and then your brain renders it in a visual form that we know as sight. The exact same thing happens with the computer. The data is sent to the computer, then it is rendered in the form of a picture that people can look at. As far as I'm aware, it's real time. There may be a second or two delay, but it is as it is happening. They can actually see through the eyes of the target. It's done all remotely. And that is rendered, of course, in essentially real time on a computer screen. And then it is to the point where it's so accurate, you can actually see the individual pores on someone's face. See scars and nicks and so forth. And so you can understand how if you had several people, for example, that you were able to do this, you can see through their eyes in a room or on a street corner or within an office building, wherever it is. You can get total situational awareness simply by looking through their eyes, and you can see through basically it's like being 3 or 4 or 5 different people all at the same time.
The next thing that is really interesting is, everybody's talking about augmented reality and VR right now. If you've taken any drugs like LSD, suddenly it becomes real, right? Our minds are actually doing AR or VR, right? Putting dragons in the room and creating all this stuff. We're able to, the point is, we are able to do that with our brains as they exist right now. So there's no need for external hardware. once we tap into the brain, our minds itself can actually create overlays of AR and VR. If we have algorithms that stimulate the right things and give it the right data, we could literally see a screen pop up. We call it hallucinating, right? But these would be controlled hallucinations run by algorithms that would give us everything AR would without any glasses, without any contact lenses.
This technology can be used to beam images and even motion pictures into one's brain. Images and motion pictures that are so realistic that you think you're actually watching a movie or seeing something in reality. It's like a virtual reality 3D rendering that takes place within the target's mind.
But you can imagine us entering entirely living in the real world as we do now, and also living in this virtual world where they are combined right inside our minds. But as soon as we connect our brains to the internet, emotions are also data. We could start literally to feel somebody else's pain. And now we say, I feel your pain. We don't really feel their pain. But in the future, we may actually really feel their pain. Like if they're sad, all of a sudden we could tap in, to your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend, and you could be like, oh my God, I feel your pain. I feel your anxiety,
This technology can also be used to manipulate the emotions of the target. It can induce fear, love, hate. It can cause you to be nervous. It can cause you to be confident. It can cause you to be depressed. It can cause you to be happy. It can cause you to feel any fucking emotion at any time by artificially inducing them.
So, like any technology, there are great things we could do, and then there are very horrible things that could result from it that are unanticipated. Now, if somebody hacks into your cell phone or your bank account, they can steal your identity. But it's not your real identity. It's more like your money. And that's bad enough, right? That's pretty bad if you get hacked and they steal your, they do identity theft. But if they're connected, if your brain is connected directly to the internet, then it will be real identity theft. They could take you. They could literally erase you. They could reprogram you in a way without you even knowing it. So you think you're in control of your own will, but it's actually somebody else.
It can literally stop your own thoughts from happening and replace them with other thoughts by sending thoughts to your head. And it's so sophisticated that you cannot tell where these thoughts are coming from. There's no way to discern that they're coming from somewhere other than your own mind. So you can imagine how bad this would be for people that don't even realize this technology exists. And they're having these thoughts, which they think are spontaneous, because being under the influence of this technology now, kind of having been on both sides of it, I am just amazed at the way it works. And I know that the thoughts that they beam into your head originate from the exact same place in your mind that your own natural thoughts originate from. So if I didn't know I was under the influence of this technology, then I would have no idea that anyone was influencing my thoughts at all. And that's exactly what it can be used for. It can be used to sway people in terms of their opinion, to make them go along with a certain agenda. It can be used to turn groups of people or individuals against each other for whatever purpose.
And who do we trust with this technology? Well, apparently not Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't do that good a job at protecting our data. Do we trust a government? Do we trust Donald Trump? Who do we trust? Yeah, decentralized, a blockchain, right? You're going to have technology that protects us. Technology which really doesn't exist today, and it has to be so foolproof, and we have to have so much faith in it that we're willing to open up our brains to that potential of being hacked. So my final slide here is that, our future could go two ways, right? We could literally create heaven on earth. So we are all one giant being, and we are all working in unison, and we are experiencing these amazing things. Or it could be hell, where there's some evil AI or evil people controlling everything we do, and we're more like zombies, you know? Where we don't even know it. Like, we think we're free, and we're not actually free.
One of the things I'm concerned about is the technology as it's being researched and developed in Seattle utilizes emotion manipulation and behavior manipulation without the game stalking and without the voice to skull aspects. And so this use of the technology can be done very covertly to the point where the person it's being used against will not know that this technology is being used against them. And that is one of my main concerns and one of the reasons why I want to bring more light to this technology and to this issue, because this technology could potentially be being used against tens to hundreds of millions of Americans every day. I've mentioned in some of my podcasts how there are field events where they will not direct this technology at an individual, but create a general field of frequency in a geographical area so that everybody that within that geographical area is feeling the effects of the technology. It's more of a general application of the technology instead of an individual specific application of the technology. But when you consider that use of it and the fact that it is used for emotion and thought and behavior modification, then we could potentially be looking at many, many millions of people across the country that are under the influence of the technology today, right now.
It's going to be very hard to stop. It is going to be very hard to stop. Think about it. You know, it's sort of a one-way path. I've never seen humanity roll back technology. What we can do is control it. So like with nuclear weapons, we barely kept those in control, you know. With other weapons, not so much, like chemical weapons. But we need to start talking about this now.
There is a very real risk that you are going to become a full-blown 24/7 targeted individual. And this technology at that point, when it is nationwide, will be used by automated supercomputer software programming that will manipulate the emotions and the behavior and the thoughts of everybody in the United States of America. And it can all be done remotely. It's very much like the microchip kind of tracking the New World Order, this entire, control grid that's supposed to be rolled out against the American people someday. And I'm here to tell you that it's already here. There isn't going to come a day where there's troops in the streets and tanks rolling down your neighborhood and riot gear and all this stuff. We might have isolated incidents like that. It might get like that every once in a while, but the true control grid is this technology, voice to skull, hive mind, behavior manipulation technology. And it can all be done remotely. It can be done simply by targeting you with the frequency, locking into the resonant frequency of your DNA and your mind, and in that manner completely track and trace and control you 24 hours a day.
And it's highly, highly valuable for intelligence purposes and military purposes, corporate espionage purposes. And it is amazing the extent to which this technology works. It's so far advanced beyond what most people are aware of. It's truly mind-blowing. And I think that's a big part of educating people, is making them understand that, fortunately or unfortunately, this is possible and it is being done right now today.
And how did you get into working with DARPA and the CIA?
It was odd. I gave a resume to a headhunter, ironically, and they're called headhunters, and my head was taken for a CIA think tank. At the time, I didn't know it. It was a technology think tank, and it was all funded by DARPA, and then I got shuffled around as a scientist to these various other projects.
For people who aren't familiar, could you tell us what DARPA is?
Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. They do all of the pie in the sky projects, long-term, well-funded. I have some of the best scientists, and it's mainly where all the top secret research goes on. And that some of it I can talk about, some of it I can't, and it's a very fine line. I'm not trying to hurt my country. I'm not trying to hurt anyone here, but there is a cover-up going on about the Havana syndrome. And so this is what we're hoping Len and I to expose today.
So when did you guys meet each other? And how did you guys meet?
So after I was diagnosed with Havana syndrome by Dr. Hofer at the University of Miami, I started reaching out to elected officials, to all the researchers. One of the people I contacted gave me Robert's book, Soulcatcher, Project Soulcatcher. I read it, and I said, I have to meet this guy. And I contacted him on social media and made a trip. I live in the Chicago area, just about 45 minutes from downtown, and contacted Robert, said, asked to fly to meet him, and we flew to Idaho and spent the day talking, and I learned a lot about it, and I continue learning from Robert. We became friends, and we have common goal to expose this.
So how did you first develop this syndrome? What was happening? What were you doing? You were a civilian. You weren't working in the government in any capacity. So how does this happen to a civilian?
It just started happening. I developed tinnitus, the ring in the ear, first in certain parts of the house, and I heard noises and voices, and I could not figure out, and then vibrations. These vibrations are experientially, it's like nothing else. There's no neurological disorder that feels like that. And I can tell you, as a patient and as a physician, experientially, it is very distinct. Your whole body vibrates. Your head is heavy pressure. The sound is deafening. You get disoriented. Can't walk. Can't talk. It incapacitates you, and it can last from 10 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour and a half, and it's very painful. It's very uncomfortable, and it feels like concussion. After that, and you actually have symptoms of concussion, the movement of the eyes, nystagmus, and this is why some people give it the name immaculate concussion. But it was escalating. I was searching for an answer. I had convulsions from it, which is one of the things that people experience. I realized how serious it was. Neurologists were unable to diagnose. I started looking through the literature, found a paper by Dr. Hofer where he describes 25 diplomats that he examined and diagnosed with what he called acquired neurosensory dysfunction. And that's the diagnosis that he gave to these diplomats, and he gave this diagnosis to me. But my attacks did not happen overseas. They happened domestically in my house, and I traveled and stayed at hotels, went to other states, and it was happening there too. So it's just not one location. And it escalated. Then I was diagnosed with traumatic encephalopathy, basically like post-traumatic brain syndrome. But there's no injury, there's no concussion. This is not a type of injury where you have mechanical trauma. Right. This is energy. This is what they call non-kinetic weaponry. And this is how we met.
Why would somebody like you be targeted? What were you doing? Were you dealing with other people in government or diplomats, or do you have any reason to suspect that somebody would target you with something like this?
None. I have no idea why I was chosen to be targeted, and I keep no government secrets. I never worked for a government. I don't know what the reason is, and I'm not doing it. So perhaps people who do it to me would know the answer.
So is this something that you believe happened to you one time and it had like a lasting residual effect? Or do you think this is something that happened, you were targeted by some sort of weapon or something multiple times?
Multiple times on ongoing basis. I just had 2 attacks this morning before I got on the plane. These are active attacks, and experientially they feel exactly the same. The vibrations, all the symptoms are the same. And not only that, I have a brain scan that I did in April and did in October. So in 6 months, what this Havana syndrome is also described as brain connectivity disorder. So it disrupts connectivity between neural nodes within the brain. And I have these broken connections, these called delta waves, that you're only supposed to have it during deep sleep. And I have them all over, and these are basically non-functional connections between neural nodes. And since April to October of this year, I have 20% more. There's no degenerative neurological disorder that behaves that like that. This is a very fast progress, and because I'm having these daily active attacks. These are not functional episodes. These are active attacks that make me vibrate, make me disoriented. They're extremely painful. Sometimes I just have to go to the basement and scream in the pillow. It's extremely debilitating. I've been on medical leave for the last year, and it's hard for me to do any cognitive work. I work when I can.
Licensed psychotherapist. After graduate school, I began working the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet at the time, Central State Hospital in Central Georgia, the size of a small town. I got a job at the state prison in the psychology department and worked there for the entire time I was studying the voices. After graduate school, I'd been programmed to believe, like everybody else, that schizophrenia was due to a chemical imbalance in the patient's brain and that the voices were hallucinations. When I hit the front lines and watched, I never saw a psychiatrist ever give any kind of lab test or any other kind of test to determine what chemicals in the patient's brain were out of order or imbalanced. And I found that quite odd. They would just go into their bag of, powerful psychiatric meds, which were mainly major tranquilizers.
Paul says, but you have the mind of Christ. There's a distinction with these different minds, or you want to say mind, personas. You take on this persona. Again, you're going back to how they have their own minds, will, and emotions that they put upon you, but they make you think that it's you. Hey, we want to overeat. Hey, we want to sexually indulge. Right. They make you think that it's you that wants this. You don't really want that. You don't want to keep going back to that dope. You don't want to keep going back to crystal meth and smoking crack and stealing from your family. You don't want to do that, but for some reason you can't stop it. You're not alone. Again, talking about these different personas that kind of sit in with you. When Jesus casted out demons, they introduced themselves as names. They had their own names. We are legion, we are this, we are that, and they're letting you know. In my experience, these demons coming out naming themselves of what at least their job or what they did or what they carry out. Very interesting that they present themselves and they have different names and stuff as well.
Yeah, there was a period of time where I was actually carrying on conversations with them. And I did that long enough to realize that they were separate entities, and they would respond independently of what the person thought. So with the same person, the same individual that his voices were saying, you have no right to interfere with our way of life. I kind of ignored him and kept working with this guy, and he kept getting better and better and better. And then one day he comes into my office for his appointment, and he looks really strange. And that was after what I was doing was reading some shamanic stuff. I was reading stuff by Miguel Ruiz, who was talking about these kind of entities and them being parasites. And I didn't realize they were parasites at the time. But I brought that book into the prison, and when this same fella came in, I outlined a paragraph, and I said, listen, this is a shaman talking about what seems to be similar to what your voices have been telling you. And it was also talking about the energy drain, So what I did was I started reading that to him, and I said, I'd like your opinion on this. I got to the point where it started talking about the energy drain, and I looked at this guy, and he looked like a zombie. He was just staring. He had this glazed over look.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in back of my head, there was this like loud explosion of crackling, like an arc welder. And it was like crack, 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 crack. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And it's like crack, 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 and it goes over to the right-hand wall. And I'm looking, but I'm afraid to take my eyes off of him because I'm thinking he's going to attack. And I pushed my chair against the back wall, because what they did is they put female guards over the medical unit at that time. By the time they they would be virtually useless if one of these guys attacked you. So you're basically on your own. Pushed my chair against the back wall, got ready to kick him back if he came at me. And I'm trying to split my attention between watching him with that strange affect and trying to see whatever it was that was making this loud, it sounded just like an arc welder, crack, 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 crack. And it moved at a 45-degree angle up the right wall, and I'm kind of switching my attention back and forth, back and forth. And then it starts moving across the ceiling over his head, so I can see clearly, and there was nothing there.
Wow.
Crack, 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 crack. And all the while, he's staring at me with this zombie-like stare. He's not moving. And I'd say to him, I said, do you hear that? He doesn't respond. He's just staring at me. And I'm like freaked out from his reaction. I'm freaked out from this crackling. And then it starts crackling down the left wall, which is right next to my leg. And it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can right at my leg. And I'm looking between that and him. And it's empty. It's completely empty. But this thing is crackling in there. And I'm like totally freaked out. And it lasted 20, 25 seconds. It wasn't just a brief episode. It went on like seemingly forever. And I'm kind of looking back and forth like, and then he slowly gets up and he goes, I gotta go. And he shuffles out of there, and I'm like, yeah, go. Get out of here. Go. So he finally leaves, and I'm shocked. I'm stunned. I'm actually just sitting there like, what the hell just happened? And he leaves, and I go inspect the wall, and there's no burn marks. There's nothing. I see nothing that could cause that at all, but I clearly heard it. I went out into the hall, checked all the other doctors' offices down the hall. There's nobody there. I'm the only one in that wing. The female guard was up front. She didn't hear anything of this because I had the door closed. And I'm shocked. I mean, I just went into shock. It's like, what the hell?
When you say it's actively happening, you think that this is being something that's controlled, or do you think it is something that just has an effect that lasts over a long period of time and it happens sporadically at random times?
I think that these are active attacks. These are not residual. These are not functional episodes.
So their episodes are not random.
No, I can't predict when they're gonna happen. They can happen. It can wake me up in the middle of the night. It can happen.
There's no pattern.
There's no pattern. When you listen to newer weapon experts that warn us about these attacks, they call them intentional. So these are intentional attacks. These are not, the brain does not produce them. There's a school of thought that these are functional neurological disorder, but in fact, the brain injury from these energy attacks are classified as organic. So there's a damage to the brain. So to answer this question scientifically would take somebody to measure that energy coming into my brain, but the detection methods in the intelligence reports are classified. So I can't tell you that this energy is coming in because I'm not measuring it. Nobody is measuring, nobody is investigating it. But I guarantee you these are active attacks. I'm the biggest skeptic. I'm scientifically minded. I have no doubt that these are active attacks.
There was a recent documentary on CNN, Immaculate Conception, where the doctor who was investigating, it was CIA, came down with the same symptoms. So it's kind of interesting. The doctors they hired that they are not even allowed to know.
Talk directly into that thing.
That they do not even know that we've been working on the same weapons, directed energy weapons, often referred to as DEW, mind control weapons. The Chinese are working on them. The Russians and US have had them for a long time. But dial-in lethality is what's happening oftentimes for those that show mild traumatic brain injury. It can be done through cavitation effects using sound waves, highly unlikely in the Cuban embassy attacks. And it can be done through microwave-directed energy if it's amplified. In fact, there's something called the Frey effect. The Army had it on their website called V2K, and that's how a lot of people refer to it, that can pipe voices into someone's head. You can't plug your ears. It actually vibrates the brain, which is like many concussions, through the small pulses that expand the tissue and then contracts it, then goes to the inner ear where they can hear it. If you just turn that up, it causes brain damage. You're heating the brain. So there are a lot of ways, and a weapon, for example, that I think is reclassified now, but it was done at the University of Nevada as a non-lethal weapon that resonates the dopamine cells of your brain, producing cells of your brain, and it floods it. Now, it worked. The Air Force reclassified it.
Flood your brain with dopamine?
Yeah, dopamine dump. And that incapacitates the adversary in a non-lethal way. Not totally non-lethal, though. If you have too much neurotransmitter in your brain, it's a neurotoxin. It'll also cause brain damage. So brain damage can occur through these weapons that are non-lethal in many different ways.
Do you have any way of describing, or is there any evidence anywhere that could explain something that's happening, like to describe what Len is describing is happening to him?
Sometimes just in my leisure reading, I like to read U.S. patents, don't you? So if you just go to the deep state machine that we call Google, just look up U.S. patent number 6470214. Oh, what do you know? Directed energy weapon, targeted individual patents. From the year 2000, pulsative manipulation of central nervous system. Published in 2002, method and device for producing a desired brain state via magnetic waves. And this fun one from 2013 has 4 different assignees, controls brain state by placing engineered EMF patterns into the AC wiring of a building. And from 2014, induced desired brain state in person by adding waves into a music file. And from the year 2000, induces desired emotional state through an EMF, sleeplessness, sexual arousal. 2015, monitors vital signs of subject via remote application of radar waves, handheld. And then here's one from 2002. Remotely transmit intelligible subjective sound into targeted consciousness. Voice to skull. Oh, and who's the original assignee? The United States Air Force. And so, would the U.S. deep state government use such patents on its people?
Is there any sort of weapon that you're aware of that can do that?
Sure. It's very complex. But if you cognitively model someone, you have a brain print, like a fingerprint, and if you use autocorrelation techniques, and there's a way, and we'll just kind of wave our hand, functional MRI that you can do at a distance over the earth, you have every human being's brain pattern. You can control 8 billion brains on the planet, potentially, read them. Pre-crime, I mean, you can imagine during warfare, it'd be useful for a number of objectives. So in that situation, you'd want it continuous, and you'd beam the entire Earth over it. You're like a cell phone. Your brain is a circuit. So if you're dialed in, once you have a cognitive model, you would never be able to escape it under the magnetosphere or ionosphere. It's worldwide, and you can ask a number of people in every country, is it happening in your country? And they're just like the exact same symptomology.
Other than the symptomology and the vast amount of people in government and so forth that experience these same symptoms, what other evidence do we have of technology like this?
Well, I sent you some articles and papers. There are just many books. You can go on Google. The difference between, I just don't believe these diplomats are being hit and by a drive-by microwave weapon. I think the brain damage is being done because the brain rewires itself more rapidly. Let's say if you lose your eyesight, then your hearing and taste, smell, your taste and smell get better. Your brain adapts faster. During this adaptation process, you can insert an external signal, sort of like hiving brains together.
Insert an external signal.
Yes, an electromagnetic signal. And how would you do that, you might ask? And the details get very complex. But there are several patents that you can access that talk about inserting a signal into the microcircuits and macrocircuits of the brain. Now, you got to know those patterns, the lock and key mechanism. Otherwise, it won't affect you. It will only affect the target brain if the brain print fits.
The brain print?
Yes, signature. Everyone has a unique one. And you ask, well, how do you broadcast this over the world? How do we talk to nuclear submarines underwater?
How do you explain this is happening to Len? How do you rationalize it?
I can, because one, it follows the symptomology, like I said, of all these others. Right. But for me, I don't know if he wants me to mention this. Let me ask him in private. Hold on.
Okay, yeah.
Can I talk? Here's how I do my studies, and I wanted to find the commonalities, but I have to throw away the ones I'm uncertain about that are true targets. maybe there's natural schizophrenia. There's a whole bunch of chemical imbalances,
Right,
et cetera.
right.
These weapons can actually induce and mimic all those diseases and effects. But the conversations, the scripts, they're called, are always the same. I've heard them all. They're slightly tailored for each individual, but they're scripts. And they're meant to confuse, the very derogatory. That's just typical breakdown. If you've ever been to boot camp, you're a worm until you're part of the team. And why would you want to break down the ego of that person? To rebuild it. So this gets into creating Manchurian candidates, split personality spies, and information couriers, people that will carry messages to other places without being aware that they're actually doing it.
So, be feeling all-knowing and all-powerful, and then she's in my face, and I just feel impotent.
When you say impotent, do you mean sexually?
No. She's talking about Jake the Flake and the marching band, and why do people make fun of marching bands? That's a worthy entertainment, and I should have ripped out her heart.
Why didn't you?
It's not part of the plan, or has that changed?
Do you want the plan to change?
No.
Good. Then find someone else to take her heart out, and you and I will eat it together. Now tell me about your dreams.
I'm gonna head to work.
Hello?
Andy Bouchard?
Yes, who is this?
Are you listening?
Yes, who is this?
Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Prospero año y felicidad.
Do you know where you're going?
Yes.
Good. Hang up your phone.
So you can imagine the misperception that is caused by this, and a lot of people, the targets when they're interviewed are tricked into believing evil aliens have abducted their brains, demons.
They're tricked.
Yes.
How are they tricked?
They're told.
By who?
By the voices, the V2K. So they'll say, we're the Russian government, we're the Chinese government, we're evil aliens, we're Satan's, satanic ritual abuse. And I've heard all these stories. One guy believed it was some 14-year-old kid with an Xbox that lived next door. The trickery really is that great when you're under hypnosis that people will believe something other than a massive government could do this. And so anyway, my interview with Len, he very well described a typical breakdown script that's used on almost all the TI victims. TI stands for targeted individuals. Some of them are pretty crazy. They have names like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, and those are the confusion tactics. And when they're breaking down the ego of the human through all the pains and tortures and the verbal breakdown, these are typical CIA torture scripts. I mean, Kubark manual. And they do good cop, bad cop interrogation called Jeff and Mutt, and they go right through the list, right? Just textbook. So whoever the handlers are on the other side of this synthetic telepathy, they're following the handbook perfectly, and they've been trained.
But why Len?
And everyone asks that. Why me? Every target. So sometimes they come up, I cut some important guy off in traffic. He put me on a list, or it's my ex-husband, or something like that. obviously, if you work for government, you're just like, well, obviously it's, it's the government. But you want a random sample of the population, all languages, all cultures, in order for a worldwide weapon of an AI system that can interact with every human brain, for example. When you if you develop a new drug, well, you have a control group, and then you give the placebo, and then you have the actual drug experiment in order to do a double-blind study.
Right.
So why me? I'm nobody. Well, that's exactly probably why they chose you.
Right, but if they're doing some sort of an experiment like this and testing him, how would they gather information? How would they know about Len's symptoms and know how Len is feeling? How would they know it's working?
You want to answer that?
Yeah, I believe that there is it's a two-way bi-directional connection. And once again, it's called remote neural monitoring and intervention. There are patents around it. Plus, the medical information that I produce is probably very relevant to them if it is in fact human experimentation without consent, which violates Nuremberg, Geneva Convention, every human right. But that's a speculation on my part because I'm not the one doing it. It's been done to me, and I don't know why. I don't know who is doing it, what the purpose is. I can only speculate.
And let me interject here. So a lot of the, a few of the targets were true Manchurian candidates. I tried to speak with Senator Clinton at the time. She wouldn't talk to us, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up to her is because someone was hearing her voice, ventriloquism, and they believed she was the one torturing them. And that's how you program, they're called programmed assassins. I thought she might be interested in that. And so if you're programming someone to go after, let's say, a political target, all you have to do is use voice morphing and pipe in the tortures, the pains, and 24 hours, make it an artificial intelligent chatterbot too. And you'll drive the person crazy, and they'll want to kill and stop the pain of the target, which they'll go after that person, be it their neighbor, be it a lot of these school shootings. I think that you hear about on the news. They hear voices, and the news, the mass news media will just write them out. Oh, they're crazy.
There's a story apparently about people seeing a white van. Or what? Let me just ask you this: what do the people who claim that Havana syndrome is like some fake thing that's like created by schizophrenics or whatever, talking about crazy things? What sort of arguments are they making?
They're using a pseudoscience that's kind of a tautology of psychiatry. If we find an abnormality in a person, we then classify it, and then it becomes a disease, a mental illness. Now, the problem with that is if we're trying to hide a very sophisticated weapon, one that actually targets the mind, there's no way to use that model of science to explain it. You immediately are discrediting it. You're being a skeptic. You're not finding the alternative hypotheses. So the people that say these things, one, it hasn't been done to them. They haven't worked on the weaponry. They haven't done their research. And it's a kind of a lazy mind. They just rather say everyone's crazy, mass delusion. They think the sky is falling, etc. And that's just, I don't. Since I know they exist, and I've studied this for 20 years and worked on portions of it, I have very bad things to say about those people.
Now, when you worked on programs for DARPA and the CIA, What sort of you worked on neurotechnology? Is that right?
Again, we're getting into a fine line about my background, what I talk about, but EEG controlled robots, it's a project, robotic surgery in medicine, voice identification and morphing technologies, natural language processing, signal intelligence of tanks from satellites, things like that. But I can't talk directly about too much about the very details of the advanced sensors and systems involved, if you can appreciate that.
Well, some of the greatest innovation in technology obviously comes from war and the military industrial complex. Are there any positive aspects of neurotechnology and this type of technology that are being utilized or that are being developed?
Oh, absolutely. If we go throughout history, all technologies are neutral. Fire can cook food, kill bacteria, keep you warm, but it can burn down villages. So the war machine will almost always use it first for their advantage and keep it as secret as possible. It's a great interrogation tool. Imagine having bloodless wars where you just fatigue your enemy and they drop to their knees. We use the voice to skull and LDAR, long range acoustic device, in the Gulf War to say this is all lay down your arms, and they believed it.
So what is that? Can you explain exactly what that is? The LRAD?
LRAD is a sonic long range acoustic weapon. The V2K is a microwave weapon. You can't plug your eardrums. You can't stop the sound.
It conducts straight to your brain.
Yeah, and it makes it sound like it's coming, the sound or voice or music or whatever you want to play is coming right from the center of your head. So it works pretty well in war, and you can imagine other effects. You're getting brutalized, beaten up, all virtual. And the brain damage, unfortunately, they're going to have to work on that. But otherwise, you can literally traumatize an entire population. Okay, so are those good effects rather than guns? Perhaps. But there are other good effects. Imagine once the civilians have use of this technology is very old, very old.
What the Neuralink technology?
Yeah.
Really? How old is it?
I can track back at least synthetic telepathy or piping voices into people's head right around Kennedy's assassination, but about 1958 was the earliest target I could find.
And who was this? What was this situation? Can you explain this specific incident?
Exactly like Len Baird. Same thing. He wrote about it in a book. I don't remember the title of it exactly. It really seemed to come online with a bunch of people in about 1976, the bicentennial of this nation. And there seems to be increases in the number of people that have these complaints given bigger military budgets. Now, why there's a correlation there, I don't know. You'll have to make your own speculation. But this isn't new. Havana Syndrome is not new by any means. It has a new name. It's getting recognition by the news. But honestly, it's been squelched. It's been covered up for many, many decades.
Do you think, do you know if Elon has any sort of government contracts with Neuralink?
No. As far as I know, he does not.
Okay.
He'll be approached, obviously. But what I think they're doing, like some of the projects I worked on, in my time at DARPA, became real big companies like Google and Facebook and et cetera. So I think it's a technology transfer. They can help civilian scientists, come up with the ideas to make it look like it's new, and not the other way around, that the universities came up with it and then it's then they bought it from them. So I think I hope Elon actually succeeds, because then this isn't imaginary stuff anymore. People will then see, wow, we can really connect brains together and make hyper intelligence. I sent you that article from Duke University, a video of how they put brain chips, and you don't need brain chips, but that's one way, one technology, into 3 monkeys, connected their cerebral cortex. And in this experiment, they could prove that 3 monkey brains together acted intuitively as one brain and was able to solve a problem that the individual monkeys were not able to solve. And that's a really important finding. Now, can we extend that to an entire population and help solve the world's problems? We can't even fathom what a larger mind would look like. It's certainly not human.
Wasn't there another experiment done where they connected like a human and a human brain and a monkey's brain?
There was. How do you know about that one?
I heard about it. I don't remember where I heard about it. I was a girl.
Yes, and an ape. The Army experiment. I think it was in the 60s.
I might have heard you talk about it.
Oh, maybe. And it didn't end well. What they were trying to do is cybernetically link, and that's the term when you connect.
Who was doing this study?
It was the Army and one other group, but I can't remember. And they were hoping, because they didn't break down it all comes together, so give me a chance here. They weren't able to break down the ego of the ape or the girl per se, so their brains,
the what?
The young girl that was used as an experiment.
They weren't able to break down what?
The ego.
Okay.
So sense of self. We all have a sense of self. Right. We believe we're separated from everybody else, and even though we have 2 hemispheres of the brain, we believe we're one brain.
Right.
It's an illusion, optical illusion, delusion of consciousness, as Einstein says. So what happened is when they put the girl in the cage, the ape tore apart. It wasn't able to recognize her as an extension of itself. And I believe this is part of the reason of the breakdown, the torture that TIs are experiencing, is they have to break down the ego in order to be part of a greater mind, or mind controlled.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. A worldwide global brain.
In today's digital age, technology's reach stretches deep into every corner of our existence, offering immense benefits and lurking challenges that we must all be aware of. One such potent example is reflected in United States Patent 3951134, issued in 1976. This patent, created by Robert G. Melek, is for a rather astonishing invention, a device capable of remotely monitoring and even altering brain waves using electromagnetic signals. Interesting side note, the name Malek looks and sounds very much like the name Moloch, which some believe is a god in which some are claimed to make sacrifices to. Just think, remotely monitoring and even altering brain waves. Imagine antennas that can send specific frequencies into our brains, connecting with and potentially altering our thoughts. This technology is like something out of a sci-fi movie, yet it exists, promising progress while presenting profound ethical dilemmas. Why should we care? Because this technology could allow for the invasion of our most private selves, our very thoughts and mental states. The potential to manipulate our behaviors without consent could shift it from a medical marvel to a tool for dominance and control. For instance, unauthorized people could use it for surveillance, peering into our minds without us even knowing. Imagine living in a world where your thoughts are not your own, where technology can shape your feelings and actions invisibly. It's a chilling prospect. Think about its implications in the political and military spheres. Such a tool could manipulate entire populations, subtly influencing how people think and behave, potentially shifting public sentiment or creating discord without anyone realizing the strings being pulled behind the scenes. Fortunately, steps are being taken to address and mitigate the misuse of such powerful technology. The U.S. patent application, U.S. 2020-0275874, introduces systems designed to identify when these technologies are being abused. This patent outlines methods to tell the difference between the victims of abuse and those misusing the technology. It uses psychological tools and interactions to draw out the distinct behaviors that differentiate victims from those attacking them. For example, techniques are applied to provoke responses from attackers that help reveal their identity. This involves using complex software, psychological analysis with questions that assess responses, and even advanced technology such as polygraph machines and fMRI scans to gather data and confirm what's happening. But what about the everyday gadgets we use? Patent 6506148B2 explains how devices like TVs and computer screens could influence our nerves' behavior through specific electromagnetic fields. These fields, hiding behind our favorite shows and apps, could subtly affect our state of mind without us even knowing. A shocking and unsettling idea when you consider how much screen time we engage in. Our handheld devices, especially smartphones, might use this technology by adjusting screen brightness or color, paired with addictive content to keep us hooked. Imagine short videos designed to capture our attention, paired with signals that further reinforce a habit that's hard to break. It's a bit like being drawn into a web of dependency, fueling our engagement without us realizing what's happening beneath the surface, and as a result, loss of control. So, how can individuals protect themselves? Several patents offer practical measures. Patent US 7297100, for instance, talks about creating shields against electromagnetic fields. This could range from devices that block these fields to specially designed rooms that prevent signals from coming in or out. They serve as barriers, guarding you against intrusive influences. For those dealing with auditory hallucinations, Patent US 6430443 offers a method involving gentle electrical stimulation of nerves to ease symptoms, but when modified, providing relief for those who battle these intense experiences. Ultimately, as we journey deeper into the future of technology, the ethical guidelines and regulations must evolve too. It's crucial for authorities to enforce safety measures, ensuring technology betters our lives rather than manipulates them. Awareness and vigilance must go hand in hand, helping us welcome technological advancements without sacrificing our freedom. In wrapping up, while these inventions demonstrate the remarkable potential of technology to improve our lives, they also highlight the need for responsible usage. As we embrace these advancements, let's remain conscious of the balance between harnessing these powers for good and guarding against their misuse. By keeping informed and involved, we ensure that technology enhances our shared human experience rather than compromises it. Thank you for being part of this vital conversation, exploring how these innovations might shape our world for the better, or otherwise.
Now, Len, how many people have you spoken with or met that are experiencing the same symptoms that you're experiencing?
Hundreds.
And when you went down to, was it Miami when you met with the doctor? How many people has he seen that he's diagnosed, and how specifically did he diagnose you? And were there any other neurological diseases that were similar or in the same realm as Havana syndrome? Or did he actually diagnose you with quote unquote Havana syndrome?
He diagnosed me with acquired neurosensory dysfunction.
Okay.
And that's the name of the paper that he published about Havana syndrome. So if you read it, he talks about 25 symptomatic.
Maybe you can pull this up, Austin. What's his name?
Hoffer. Acquired.
Dr. Hoffer of the University of Miami.
Yeah. So he examined 25 symptomatic patients, medevac from Cuba, and 10 of their roommates, because these attacks never happened at the embassy. It always happened at the hotel or living quarters, and they were in the same room.
And never happened at the embassy. That's interesting.
Never happened at the embassy. So people who experience symptoms, and there could be other people, their roommates, that never experienced it. And so all the people who experienced the symptoms were examined for signs of concussion, and they all had symptoms of concussion, even though they never had any physical trauma to their head, and they all had severe vestibular abnormalities, and the abnormalities were at the level of brain injury, not just variation within the population. Because the criticism was, well, vestibular tests are not really that precise, and some people with anxiety could have vestibular abnormalities, but not to this extent. And Dr. Hoffer really explains it in his lecture, in his paper. Dr. Giordano, who was part of the team, confirms it. Dr. Belband, who did a test of eye movement by applying this computerized method. And this is how they can tell the Havana syndrome type of damage to the brain from a mechanical concussion. So they're both damage to the brain, but they're different because the mechanism is different.
So there's an eye test where they can tell.
Yeah, correct. The eye movement test.
But the effect of the damage is the same, but there's no physical, like, abrupt, like there's no trauma. There's no physical trauma.
There's no mechanical trauma.
Did you mention the quantitative EEG?
Yeah. So the same patients were sent to the University of Pennsylvania and to the trauma center, and they were all done. They performed various tests on them, including fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. There's specific type of MRI that shows connectivity in the brain called DTI, diffusion tensor imaging, and they found abnormalities that, once again, these specialists see in traumatic brain injury. So the doctors who examined these patients, they all, in one voice, tell us something happened to these patients, and these are the findings. And the findings are they constitute brain injury. The critics of that say this is psychogenic illness, and it's spread like mass hysteria. People under stress develop these sensations, and they all kind of repeat after each other, and their brain kind of develops these patterns. But none of these specialists, and I spoke to Dr. Bartholomew, who co-wrote a book about Havana syndrome being mass hysteria, and he admitted himself in my conversation. He said, if there were findings of brain injury, that would invalidate my hypothesis.
Right.
And so the doctor, but he has never seen a patient with Havana syndrome. But all the doctors that saw the patients say these patients have brain injury findings.
How many civilians are there dealing with the same thing?
I would give, from my estimate, low end around the world, and this is in every country, that can use the internet, that can contact me, minimum 10,000.
Minimum 10,000.
So that means a lot more.
Wow. And how many government workers or how many FBI, whatever, politicians,
You're right.
diplomats?
The very first CIA agent that came forward and said, I heard these crickets and this sound, and my brain hasn't been the same since. He's gone through the same process as Len Berry. Just block after block of government bureaucracy saying, you're delusional, this technology doesn't exist. And, you don't have to go to the Directed Energy Directorate of the Air Force to know that we've been working on this for a long time with our NATO allies. And so a lot of the work on these concussion weapons, non-lethal weapons, are done under that directorate.
Is anybody transparent about being who in government is being transparent about working on this kind of technology?
Len has stories, but he can't mention names.
Yes,
that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that there was an investigative reporting in Zeit magazine, which is a German publication. They investigated Havana syndrome, and they talked to a prominent expert in the field of directed energy, and who published a short article following the events. And then he was contacted by the DoD and by the Air Forces that that he is not to speak publicly about it. Otherwise, they will pull his funding. And
yeah, that's part of the way that you prevent leaks. Is it's a form of financial blackmail that will pull your funding if you talk about any of this openly.
Is there any correlation between you and some of the other people that have been experiencing the same thing? Is with timing of the attacks? Like, are the timing of the attacks similar between different people? Are people experiencing them at the same times? How are they being triggered? Specifically, how are they being triggered?
Yeah, it seems the ones that are severe, I call them, targets. It's some of it's stress related. You can tell. There was a paper in the late 1970s by the DIA, the Department Intelligence Agency, that said the Russians were trying to create a panic weapon that could kill a person, literally spook them to death by creating a runaway process with the adrenal gland and increasing it till blood pressure, any sort of weakness in their circulatory system, their heart would give out. And anytime we blame the Russians for something like that, we're working on it too. So it seems like oftentimes stress brings it on. And I've read that in some other papers, but otherwise it's constant for these people. 24 hours, constant. They can't sleep, which even makes it worse. It weakens the brain. One, sleep deprivation is a common torture tactic, interrogation tactic, and it breaks down the will. You're more easily suggestible. He said he has major delta brain waves, which that's a hypnotic state, which makes you more susceptible. And one of the CIA's old weapons was called REHIC, remote hypnotic intracerebral control. A lot of people don't believe they can be hypnotized through, when people think of hypnotism, they think of a watch going back and forth. And no, that's not the actual definition of hypnotism. It's in training the brain. So binaural beats, for example, on headphones, if you're off by 8 hertz, you're in the alpha delta brainwave length, and you'll actually see the brain under an EEG start to mimic that binaural beating. That's hypnotism. Now you can do it on a much grander scale of the macro circuits, the main brain frequencies, or the microcircuits. So synthetic telepathy actually can induce different emotional states. Each part of the brain has different circuitry, different frequencies, different patterns. You can induce, you can mimic almost every illness and induce it. So when someone's classified, let's say, as manic depressive, we can do that. We can make them happy for a day and then make them depressed for a day. And then the doctor will prescribe certain drugs for them, which will then do more damage to their body. But you can see why the population can't know about this. Let's just say everything I said is true. It would be the breakdown of religion. It would be anarchy. There would be no democracy. Everything.
Well, there are programs like this that have been declassified and been acknowledged by the government, like MK Ultra. They acknowledged that was real. Operation Northwoods.
Yeah,
they recognized that was a real thing. That was declassified. I mean, there's things that are sinister that the government has done that they admit to, but nothing happens. A lot of people don't even pay attention to it.
Right, until it happens to them, and then it's too late. No one will help them.
It seems like with MK Ultra, though, they were targeting more so prisoners. People that were in prison, big shot. I mean, and obviously when you think of MK Ultra, there's people like Ted Kaczynski, Charles Manson, who was the big mob guy, famous mob guy who killed a lot of people. I'm blanking on his name right now. But a lot of those people talked about how some of their contacts in the government, probation officers, were giving them LSD. That's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It was on the masses, introduced to the United States and promoted. But you're talking about specific events, such as in San Francisco, where they put a one-way mirror up and had prostitutes.
That's Midnight Climax.
Yeah,
yeah,
Climax.
That's another one.
Yeah, and then Ted Kaczynski, he lived in my dorm at Harvard, not at the same time.
He was being experimented on in Harvard.
Yeah, and that was Project Moonstruck, I believe.
Project what?
Moonstruck.
Moonstruck, okay.
A stress program.
That's a terrifying story.
Yeah, isn't it? And even the shooter in Vegas, he had FBI contacts, and that gets very murky. But the news never follows up on any of this. For example, I was in a suicide letter. The guy, Myron May, who shot up Florida State or University of Florida's library like 10 years ago. Anyway, he didn't kill anybody. But he shot people, and then it was death by cop. He was a lawyer, trained there, a successful black man, and same symptoms of Lindbergh. And his reasoning of why he shot up the school was he needed news publicity to make sure people understood this was real and was happening. And so he mentioned my name in it, but he never tried to contact me. But he gave out 7 packages in the mail, and the FBI intercepted them all to make sure none of the information was...
What were in these packages?
Just information. So they held on to it. The news stories sort of went away. People just were left, wonder why he did that. And then
what was this guy's name again?
Myron May.
Myron May.
Yeah.
And he clearly talked about having the same exact symptoms as Len.
Yeah.
Publicly.
Yeah. And he left a video testimony. And then people, the FBI eventually led it through to the senders, the packages, and they posted it on the internet. So you can find his testimony unless Google's taken it down, or YouTube or whatever. It's they don't want copycats, basically. So, oh yeah, there it is.
Oh, this is what is this, like a CNBC News? Scroll down, Austin.
Gunman's motives remain unclear. See, and that's a lie by the media.
Hours before he opened fire in Florida State University Library, lawyer Myron May left a desperate voicemail for an acquaintance with his plea, "I do not want to die in vain." The message was part of a flurry of emails, texts, and phone calls in which the former prosecutor laid bare his torment. He believed government stalkers were harassing him and using a direct energy weapon to hurt him. He said that he had sent packages to 10 people that would expose what he thought was happening to him. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, and maybe you remember the Navy Yards shooter. He used a sawed-off shotgun, actually killed, I think, 13 people. He had a clearance to get on a Navy base, and he wrote on his weapon, and the news pretends like they have no idea what's going on. "My ELF weapon," that stands for extremely low frequency, which the brain operates on, which we also communicate with submarines with because it penetrates everything. So he was convinced the Navy was behind it, and he just wanted revenge. He couldn't point the finger to stop it, so he just took it out on everyone on the base. But it creates such frustration. A lot of these shooters are trying to get this media attention.
What is this, Austin? Oh, okay. What do you think it would take for the government to, or for anyone responsible to be transparent and open about this?
I don't think they can be, because think of the atrocities and the lack of trust. I mean, that would happen.
Lack of trust of the government.
Yeah, well, I mean, even more so that they're socially engineering, let's say, gun rights. Well, let's have all these spree killers go on shooting sprees, and then the response of that stimulus would be take away guns. It's a way to socially engineer. And so you say your government wouldn't do that. Well, they very much, in long-term perspectives of how they want to shape the New World Order or shape a UN, a single government-controlled
A vast majority of, I mean, I'm not sure if it's all of them, but I know that a vast majority of these public shooters, these school shooters, they were on antidepressants and a slew of different pharmacology and pharmaceutical drugs to help them deal with depression, social anxiety, different things like that. Couldn't that be part of what is going on? I mean,
it could. I would have to see their private psychological profile. And I told you, just because they're on drugs doesn't mean anything to me. I have to interview them and see if they're being driven. It's called psychic driving. The Scottish world psychiatrist who did brainwashing, Montreal University. I'm trying to pull up his name in my files now. Anyway, he called it psychic driving. These women would go into the hospital for mild depression. He would play a 2-tape loop, just like these other breakdown processes. Your mother hates you, blah, blah, blah. I can't actually repeat how awful the scripts are they use. I compiled a list of 1,000 negative things they say, and I posted on Facebook and got away with it just because I put quotes around it.
And they use this to break down the ego?
Correct. And so they did that while they were in induced comas. I'm still talking about the brainwashing.
So they're unconscious.
Pseudo-unconscious.
Okay.
And they would keep them in a vegetative sort of sleep state.
Okay.
And I think it was probably in a delta or theta brainwave dominant state. So they could hear all this negativity. And I think they gave them LSD too. And they were just trying to wipe, and electroshock. So they were trying to wipe the brain clean so they could rebuild new memories. One woman, it was funded by the CIA. The psychiatrist got his funding from that. And the woman sued. She won. But she lost half her life. Can't remember it. Had to learn how to pee again, speak again, everything. So brainwashing works. The reprogramming part's what's interesting.
And just to make it absolutely clear, I do not have a diagnosis of paranoid or delusional disorder. I have a clean bill from my psychiatrist. The only thing that he suggested as a diagnosis is adjustment disorder, which means that I'm adjusting to this torture.
Well, at what point did you decide to see a psychiatrist?
Oh, at the very beginning, because I was actually hoping that it was a psychiatric disorder, because that way it can be treated, but it's not. This is, I had to educate my psychiatrist, but he's a very smart. Actually, every single one of my physicians that take care of me, neurologist, psychiatrist, primary care physician, and now Dr. Giordano in DC, who also confirmed, they're all on the same page. This is my diagnosis.
I just remembered the brainwashing doctor's name is Dr. Ewan Cameron.
Dr. Ewan Cameron,
yeah.
And he's Russian?
No, he was American Scottish.
American.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And this kind of funding goes on all the time, and we often do it in other countries. Long list of human experimentation by the National Institute of Health. And
I saw my neighbor this morning. My neighbor worked for Honeywell for over 35 years. He worked for Honeywell.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of briefly ran told him who I was talking to today on the podcast, and I talked about Havana syndrome. And he said, "Oh yeah." He goes, "That's 100% real." He's like, "I know we've worked on weapons like that, and so I know they work on those weapons at Raytheon." He said,
"Yeah, I can't talk about that, but yeah, he's right."
You can't talk about it,
yeah.
But you can confirm that.
I can confirm. That's all.
How for people like you and your colleagues going to school studying artificial intelligence, what percentage of you guys when you guys are doing that, do you guys have aspirations to work for the military, work for the CIA, to be spies? Like what?
No, I was a scientist. And worked on advanced surveillance equipment and other things. As a scientist, you just want to be working on cutting edge science. You don't, and you believe you're doing your country a favor and eventually be used for good. And that's part of how you get funding from the Senate for billion-dollar projects, is you have to have dual purpose, one for civilian uses and one for military. And we don't really think of the implications for the negative part. We just want to work on new cutting-edge stuff. And it's also compartmentalized on the most part. So a lot of people don't know how they're putting together a bigger weapon system. They just work on a piece of it.
Isn't Facebook working on weren't they working on something called the empathy machine or something like that?
I think I talked about.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What is that?
That is, if you can induce these emotions, touch, torture, whatever, in a way, it's kind of a beautiful thing. If you have a partner and they say something that hurts their feelings, you say something that hurts their feelings, you get to feel how they're feeling, and vice versa. So if you punch someone, you're going to feel the same pain that they do. That's called the empathy machine. But now imagine if you go beyond 2 people. Let's go to 100 people. Every time someone stubs their toe, they all feel the same pain. It would feel like random torture to everybody. Well, who stubbed their toe?
I can see the first application, the most obvious thing I could see this thing going to is pornography.
Yes, they already have, sort of virtual machines for
If they could somehow if you could buy a subscription to some sort of pornography and make every single guy watching this thing happen,
Okay, now I don't know what I'm allowed
this
to say.
This is already being used.
If you talk to the victims, the TIs, one of the worst breakdowns, and it's pretty common. I think I can say the word simulated rape and forced orgasm.
You can say anything you want. This is the internet.
Okay. And so simulated orgasms and rape is extremely common, and especially violating for women. They complain about that torture breakdown the most. But you're right. What's the positive use?
Where is it the most lucrative? Where is it the most financially beneficial? Like, where can you make the most money in this thing? You think that would be the most obvious first?
That would be the first.
Yeah.
But think of the problem. It would have to be regulated, because we know the 7 pleasure centers of the brain. And let's just say we don't have to stick in electrodes. We use ultrasonic helmet like the University of Arizona is doing to target certain parts of the brain. You just sit there and press the button all day, over and over.
There's a story of a woman that what's the story? There was a story of a woman who was in the hospital. Something was wrong with her. You may know, but she had a button. And every time she pressed it, it made her orgasm, and she was just doing it and doing it and doing it until she was basically a vegetable.
Yeah, you eventually quit eating, you die. So the government would have to step in to regulate this somehow. I don't think a lot of my research just focuses on the negative, the tortured people, the targeted, the breakdown. They're the most vocal, they're the loudest. But there is a classification weapon system called the Voice of God, and I've met some of these people.
A classified weapon system?
It's just the categorization called Voice of God weapons. Anything you can make someone hear, believe it's God.
And these are real?
Yes.
These are publicly...
There's Newsweek wrote about them.
Okay.
So,
guys, if your assessments here are correct, these are very covert weapons, aren't they?
That's correct. There's no entry or exit wound. How they're designed is to make the target feel like they're crazy, like they're imagining things.
And you guys also said that these attacks are happening right here in this city. Is that correct?
I mean, there have been some that have gone public with respect to Washington, D.C.
I think it was Mr. Grozev said you spoke to a Russian agent who said that they believe that Americans are using these same weapons on them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Might that have something to do with part of the CIA's motive to cover up the existence of this tech and these weapons?
That is a very logical possibility.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The Department of Defense recently started initiating protocols for their employees, their agents, to discuss Havana syndrome-like symptoms. And on that list is that their agents are hearing voices in their head.
What other kind of things can this?
Oh boy, voice-to-skull technology. This is also in the foray of directed energy weapons.
What is that?
The ability to, let's just say, throw your voice into your head, or my voice into my head, or allowing algorithms that now they can blanket a whole geographical area and they can make everybody change their thoughts. They can, I use the term intrusive thoughts. Back to that fork in the road analogy. If you find yourself where you have to make a decision about something, next thing you catch yourself having an argument in your head with your own voices. Well, the ability to add another one of your voices in there, but have it controlled by somebody else's microphone, say, is a very powerful tool. And I think this is a weapon of war that we are seeing happen to everyone around us. The Department of Defense recently started initiating protocols for their employees, their agents, to discuss Havana syndrome-like symptoms. And on that list is that their agents are hearing voices in their head. And this is what they're getting at. This is that technology. That next thing you're trying to make a decision, but there's another Sean in your head that now is actually somebody else's control, and through the manipulation of that voice, they can now push you, just like we have cell phones are weaponized now, the social media platforms, and they can engage with an algorithm, and they know that they can push you in a direction by repetitive information being displayed in front of you, similar to the Takistoscope in grammar school, that they can learn your system and they can learn to manipulate it on a personalized level. by just assessing you, what the things are that you're interested in, what are your weak points, what's the crack in the dam, what's the angle of attack. And it's through repetition and access. These are simply electromagnetic impulses in your head. It's not that they can't be read, it's not that they can't be copied, and it's not that they can't be just replayed with somebody else's control. I could get a voice changing thing and I could sound like you if I wanted to. I could call you on the phone, I could call your loved ones, and I could pretend I'm Sean. And they can do that for you in your own head.
A voice only you can hear, DARPA's sonic projector. So they would pinpoint it to one target.
Hey, you. Ma'am, please wake up.
Wake up.
No sleeping in the library.
Most people of his age don't know much about sound. The whole idea of his sound spotlight system is to make sure that only one person can hear him, even though they're 20 meters away.
Hey, you there. You on the laptop.
Look at her.
Are you
She's like,
downloading
what?
illegal files to the library network? I hope not. Hey, you there, studying. Miss, can you hear me?
Look at these girls. All these girls are like, what?
Hey, you. Looking at CDs.
He's like, shit, I got caught.
Taking the mickey out of
no.
innocent readers might seem a bit childish, but there's a reason why Dr. Pompey comes here to test his kit.
A library is about the most sensitive area you can think of. The audio spotlight, we can deliver sound specifically directly to people within the library without bothering the other people that are reading quietly.
Like this. First, your voice is transformed into high-frequency ultrasound. Sound so high, no one can hear it. Ultrasound is highly directional, so, like a torch, it can be pointed at someone standing a long way away. Although they cannot hear the ultrasound, it causes secondary vibrations in the air around them, and it's that sound the person hears.
So if you imagine you're in a room and I shine a flashlight at you, it's very bright for you, but it's very dark for everybody else. Much the same way, the audio spotlight creates a very narrow beam of sound that you can shine at a listener. They hear it very clearly, and it doesn't create noise that might bother other people in the same space.
They say that targeted individuals are mentally ill people suffering from delusions and schizophrenia. They want attention, a road to fame, or unjustified compensation for pain and suffering. Whistleblowers are disgruntled intelligence agents, police officers, or other enforcement that were fired or singled out and only want compensation by the department they work for and revenge. Non-enforcement complainants are mentally ill people suffering from paranoia, delusions, and schizophrenia. Usually drug abuse is assumed or insinuated. Veterans that are targeted are suffering from PTSD and have dissociated from reality due to unhealed trauma from war. Targeted individuals are suspected criminals. They are terrorists, drug dealers, rapists, spouse abusers, bank robbers, pedophiles, etc. The list goes on and on of what people are told about targeted individuals. Targeted individuals are violent people that need to be watched 24/7 to ensure local and national security. You hear a person in a respectable position say something like this, you just take it for what it's worth and go along with life and just assume that somebody that's a targeted individual is just nuts. And that's what they want you to do because this story is being covered up. I wrote this out in one afternoon, based just on the knowledge that I have in my head, that I've experienced, that I know personally. Many targeted individuals have a high IQ, are intuitive, empathetic, creative, artistic, compassionate, are empowered free thinkers, and are very vocal in general. Targeted individuals seem to fall into specific groups. Intel or enforcement that wanted to do more than follow orders. Potential leaders that would not be corrupted and would actually make decisions to help society prosper. These targets are usually identified at a young age. Defendants in custody battles against a connected person. A person that had a negative encounter with a connected person. Knowledge from investigative conclusion. Complaints from targeted individuals are similar or the same in the United States and all around the world. A mass delusion cannot be shared by millions of people that have different religions, political affiliations, genders, ethnicities, occupations, ages, and upbringing. Due to the exact repeating circumstances, facts and conditions such as medical examinations, sworn affidavits, convictions of perpetrators in
Ach, danke für Ihre Zeit.
through repetition and access. These are simply electromagnetic impulses in your head. It's not that they can't be read, it's not that they can't be copied, and it's not that they can't be just replayed with somebody else's control. I could get a voice changing thing and I could sound like you if I wanted to. I could call you on the phone, I could call your loved ones, and I could pretend I'm Sean. They can do that for you in your own head.
A voice only you can hear, DARPA's sonic projector. So they would pinpoint it to one target.
Hey, you. Ma'am, please wake up. Wake up. No sleeping in the library.
Most people of his age don't know much about sound. The whole idea of his sound spotlight system is to make sure that only one person can hear him, even though they're 20 meters away.
Hey, you there. You on the laptop.
Look at her.
Are you
She's like,
downloading
what?
illegal files to the library network? I hope not. Hey, you there, studying. Miss, can you hear me?
Look at these girls. All these girls are like, what?
Hey, you. Looking at CDs.
He's like, shit, I got caught.
Taking the mickey
Oh,
out of
no!
innocent readers might seem a bit childish, but there's a reason why Dr. Pompey comes here to test his kit.
A library is about the most sensitive area you can think of. The audio spotlight, we can deliver sound specifically directly to people within the library without bothering the other people that are reading quietly.
Like this. First, your voice is transformed into high-frequency ultrasound. Sound so high, no one can hear it. Ultrasound is highly directional, so, like a torch, it can be pointed at someone standing a long way away. Although they cannot hear the ultrasound, it causes secondary vibrations in the air around them, and it's that sound the person hears.
So if you imagine you're in a room and I shine a flashlight at you, it's very bright for you, but it's very dark for everybody else. Much the same way, the audio spotlight creates a very narrow beam of sound that you can shine at a listener. They hear it very clearly, and it doesn't create noise that might bother other people in the same space.
They say that targeted individuals are mentally ill people suffering from delusions and schizophrenia. They want attention, a road to fame, or unjustified compensation for pain and suffering. Whistleblowers are disgruntled intelligence agents, police officers, or other enforcement that were fired or singled out and only want compensation by the department they work for and revenge. Non-enforcement complainants are mentally ill people suffering from paranoia, delusions, and schizophrenia. Usually drug abuse is assumed or insinuated. Veterans that are targeted are suffering from PTSD and have dissociated from reality due to unhealed trauma from war. Targeted individuals are suspected criminals. They are terrorists, drug dealers, rapists, spouse abusers, bank robbers, pedophiles, etc. The list goes on and on of what people are told about targeted individuals. Targeted individuals are violent people that need to be watched 24/7 to ensure local and national security. You hear a person in a respectable position say something like this, you just take it for what it's worth and go along with life and just assume that somebody that's a targeted individual is just nuts. And that's what they want you to do because this story is being covered up. I wrote this out in one afternoon. Based just on the knowledge that I have in my head that I've experienced, that I know personally. Many targeted individuals have a high IQ, are intuitive, empathetic, creative, artistic, compassionate, are empowered free thinkers, and are very vocal in general. Targeted individuals seem to fall into specific groups. Intel or enforcement that wanted to do more than follow orders. Potential leaders that would not be corrupted and would actually make decisions to help society prosper. These targets are usually identified at a young age. Defendants in custody battles against a connected person. A person that had a negative encounter with a connected person. Knowledge from investigative conclusion. Complaints from targeted individuals are similar or the same in the United States and all around the world. A mass delusion cannot be shared by millions of people that have different religions, political affiliations, genders, ethnicities, occupations, ages, and upbringing. Due to the exact repeating circumstances, facts, and conditions such as medical examinations, sworn affidavits, convictions of perpetrators in litigation, perpetrator confessions, and whistleblower testimony, it appears that occurrences in a targeted individual's life are carefully organized and executed events that are highly funded. I am a targeted individual, and I have personally experienced these techniques, tactics, and standard operating procedures myself. I've lived through this for years. I've just been researching and studying what was going on in the last 2.5, 3 years, but I've been going through this for a very long time. I believe since I was a child. And I guess that's one part that I missed here. Many targeted individuals are, well, actually, no, I didn't miss that. It said these targets are usually identified as a young age. So some people, their family will sell them into one of these programs. It's a long-term trauma-based mind control program to synthetically insert traumatic events throughout the target's life to create non-stop trauma, which creates alters and dissociative identity disorder, otherwise known as multiple personality disorder. Then when the multiple personality disorder is programmed into the target or MK Ultra victim, they can use that person as a patsy or for multiple different types of uses. Okay, so motives for a mass targeting program. A corrupt government or cabal would greatly benefit from a classified program like this. They could use good citizens that have been programmed to live in constant fear to facilitate the targeting of other good citizens by classifying fake crimes and utilizing a slander campaign against the target. If chaos and violence in our society are synthetically created, more funding for systems of power and control can easily be implemented. Non-organic chaos and violence will lead to more arrests and incarceration in private prisons. The private prison industry grows, prison run businesses grow, prison jobs grow, the judicial system grows, and the power structure grows. Complaints from targeted individuals to corrupt or misinformed psychologists, psychiatrists, or law enforcement will lead to false mental diagnosis, which will lead to mental hospital incarceration, unnecessary prescriptions, or psychotropic and SSRI drugs. Prescriptions of psychotropic and SSRI drugs. And the targeted person's capacity to testify in a court of law. All right. The more people that are targeted, the more the psychological hospital system and big pharma and the private prison industry will grow, earning billions of dollars a year. Also, after mental diagnosis is labeled, children can be taken from good families and trafficked for profit. This program is the largest, most lucrative physical and psychological crime ever committed against the people of the United States and around the world. The end result is total control of all citizens, businesses, and government for a one-world totalitarian government. This is the 1% of our population that is in control of probably 85 to 95% of the wealth in the world, and the rest of us fight over the remaining small percentage. This targeted individual program is to quiet and to take out the people that would be instrumental in fighting against a totalitarian occupation of our government and implement world control. So thank you, John D'Souza. John D'Souza is called the X-Man. If you don't know who he is, look him up. His name is JohnDesouza. Like I said, he's a former former FBI veteran, 25 years in service. He used to use this system to train other FBI agents, other federal agents, police officers, and investigators to come up with conclusions.
First logical thing they do is go to the police. Well, the police can't help you. They don't know anything. They're going to give you a lockup and 72 hours and a psych ward.
One of the men behind the technology admits he created a monster. Dr. Robert Duncan put together the technology that allows the government to transmit thoughts and voices into the heads of Americans.
I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abused, that's a light word. They're being tortured. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their head. When they talk to us, they seem totally normal. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them. They're called voice of God weapons.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all. These are people within our government at a certain level making these decisions, and they're not necessarily our president or our elected officials.
That's exactly right. They can't be removed, and they're difficult to find. They hide in the dark crevices of our government. It's been out for a while.
Voice of God weapons.
Voice of God.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
And so I've run into people randomly who believe they're talking to God. God doesn't have a voice. I don't think. I don't know what he sounds like, but they're convinced, and they'll do whatever this voice tells them. And that's the dangerous part. That's another form of trickery. God wants you to go on a killing spree, let's say. Some people would do that. You're one of God's army. So you can see how this broad swath all over the world, not only is it experimental, it could be very much a secret army of assassins. And so I call them programmed assassins. But the positive part, the voice of God, it worked in the Gulf Wars, Gulf War, when we said, Allah, lay down your arms. That's a voice of God weapon.
Okay. Is this, and you can't talk about, or can you talk about, this is something that you were involved with?
A little bit.
A little bit. Who was Dr. Is this something that Dr. Jose Delgado talked about? And who was he, and what specifically did he work on?
Dr.
Jose Delgado.
He was
Look him up, Austin.
He was known as the father of brain chips, and so he was from Yale University, and he did a lot of brain experimentation, stuff that is unethical and we wouldn't allow today per se. But we made progress of understanding the brain. He would actually wire up people. His most famous experiment was with the bull. He implanted a bull with a radio frequency chip, and he could make a bull stop from charging by pressing a button. And that impressed everybody quite a bit.
Wow.
But that's using brain chips. And
where was he? Was he in the United States?
Yeah.
But you don't need chips anymore.
Okay, this is him with the bull.
Yeah, there he is.
Dr. Jose Delgado steps into the Spanish bull ring as a bold demonstration of his research.
A risky behavioral control demonstration.
Wow. And he was working with the government? He had a famous quote, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Let's see if you can bring up the quote. Mankind does not have a right to develop his own mind.
Austin, pull up his quote. So what was Delgado working? What did he do? Where was he working from? What was he working in one of the universities here?
Yes, he was working at Yale Medical School, and he would insert wires into people's brains. And, there's always two sides to the story.
Okay, here it is. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electrically control the brain. Someday, armies and generals will be in control by electrical stimulation of the brain.
And that was in the 60s, I believe.
Whoa.
So
that's heavy.
We've come a long way since.
Yeah, I mean, if people were openly talking about that in the 60s, where are we now? And where are other nations like China and Russia and Iran?
We boycotted recently like over 100 countries from doing companies in China because they were working on mind control technologies. So, it's very much out in the open, but it's just people don't want to recognize their soul, so to speak, can be touched. Their very ego, their sense of self can be altered. They're not in control of their own emotions. That means if you don't have free will or autonomy or choice, democracies don't exist. That means religions don't exist. That means a whole bunch of things. Markets can be shaped, moved up or down at will based on people's preferences. It's total domination of the world. That's how important and why it's kept so secret. I think it's the ultimate weapon, because if you can control the people with their fingers on nuclear weapons, you're one step ahead. So this is kind of the end game, is full control of the human mind.
And at scale.
At scale, that's right, of the world.
It's kind of hard to even wrap my mind around.
It is. Something bigger than yourself is always hard to imagine. And so that's why the monkey brain experiments that they were doing at Duke, we can't fathom what us three, if our brains were connected at the speed of thought, could come up with or think about. We have to use vibrations from our throat, deciphered through our brains, through our ears, and then and talk. It's kind of an outdated form of communication amongst brains.
Well, I mean, think about it. If something like Neuralink actually came onto the market as a consumer product, that people could get this neural net inserted into their brain, and they could give them the ability to learn new skills instantaneously, or download books within seconds, or like the advantage economically would be astounding.
Yes.
And more and more people would adopt this
in order to compete.
In order to compete. But the scale, the downside of something like this is, once you have this, it would be no problem. You would almost assume that the government would be able to have some level of control over this.
It would have to, and that's why they're kind of experimenting. What are the potential downfalls? We have a term of mind viruses. How do memes pass?
Mind viruses.
Could you hack, if all the minds were connected, could you insert a virus that might shut down the human race?
That's fascinating. The term mind virus, I've used that.
If you look at us community, the whole human race, maybe the planet as a whole organism, how would you build an immune system to fight against something like that? Now, I do not believe in censorship myself, but how would you stop the flow of a mind virus? And so they're experimenting with things like
interaction with other human beings.
Yeah.
Not through screens, not through social media.
Yeah. There are other terms like memetic viruses, memes that turn into viruses. You're familiar with those that get posted around. But the utopia, the kind of end goal that the visionaries see with this technology, they know that transhumanism can't be stopped at this point, but they want to take the safest route. So a lot of these experiments are unfortunately sacrifices that will help the future generations. And that's kind of their internal marketing ploy of why they must do it. And there's a race between, the three major countries, who's going to have the best AI, whose culture is going to survive, whose money is going to dominate, whose, language is going to dominate. And so this is very competitive field in the military right now, who can collect the most minds the fastest, build the the biggest hive mind network. And so my next book is called, it's not published yet, it's called Emergent Minds, The Birth of a New Species. And that's under the 3 books that I've written of cyber and cybernetic warfare revealed. And it's going to be about kind of these architectures, topologies of humans, nodes, computing units. Very cold, the way it's described. But I'm trying to bring out the ethics of all this. The human race has to have a discussion, and this has to be on the mainstream media. Havana syndrome. Well, what is it? They don't seem to care. They're hushing it. They don't. We know what it is because it's been around so long. We know the type of weapons used.
Well, there's no financial incentive for them to talk about it either.
True, other than being good reporters.
Right. But that's not an incentive anymore.
No, it's not an incentive anymore.
So the big question is how this energy is delivered. So National Academy of Sciences in 2020 issued a report about these Havana syndrome incidents, or anomalous health incidents as the government wants us to call it. And the most plausible hypothesis is directed pulse microwave energy. So that's the causative agent. That's what causes the brain damage.
Directed pulse microwave energy.
Yeah, pulse is very, very important, because if you just microwave, it just heats up. But short pulses produce that thermoelastic effect. So the tissue is just expanding and collapsing, and that way it heats up just enough to induce damage or produce that audio, that fray effect, to hear sound or modulated voices, things like that. So pulse is very important in this scenario. But that report did not say how it can be delivered. And when you look at the 60 Minutes report, they show these devices that can fit into a small car or maybe backpack or a truck or a van, but that's an outdated technology. I question, and Robert made me question, whether it is a local source. You know, somebody sits in the van and shoots a microwave at you. So we took a trip to West Virginia, where there's a radio national quiet zone. So there are no cell towers. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no cell phone. Only receive satellite signal. There's no
phone signal.
No phone signal. No Wi-Fi. And we got inside. The reason they created that zone is because there's a deep space telescope, radar basically, that receives signals from deep state. So they don't want any interference. The zone 1, the closest to these radars, is actually has a radio police that monitors the signals. They don't allow cars with ignition because it produces electromagnetic signal. So I got next to the biggest radar and got attacked. So people that, there's no van outside.
So when you got to this place, you experienced one of these?
Yeah, I experienced one of the attacks. Just when you have to walk there, there's no, because, can't take a car. So went several miles, got there, was attacked. So definitely not a local effect. It's coming from somewhere, and you have a satellite signal, but you also have things like HAARP that can, HAARP stands for
high altitude
Auroral
research project, and it's one of the world's largest phased arrays. It's used for weather modification, steering.
Weather modification?
Well, that's one of the things it can do.
What is weather modification?
Oh, steering hurricanes, for warfare. Yeah, you heat the ionosphere and you can guide the weather. That's just one of the things.
This is a thing?
Oh, yeah. Pull it up.
And what's it called?
HARP. H-A-R-P.
And you can steer hurricanes.
Well, they don't actually, they just say weather modification. What does that mean?
Yeah.
They aren't
I guess the
making it
mind
rain.
can get creative.
But it operates also as an over-horizon radar system to detect missile launches in Russia, for example.
Everybody stop and look at this shit. Edward Snowden, the WikiLeaks guy. Alright, Snowden reveals HARP global assassination agenda. Alright, listen to some of this stuff. Pause it and read it for yourself. Alright. Unbeknownst to victims or their loved ones, HARP projects ultra-high-powered radio waves. Those waves operate at the same electronic frequency as the brainstem, selectively inducing deaths seemingly by natural causes, including by some appearing to coroners as innocuous as strokes or heart attacks. Also, look up here. Remotely silence perpetrators of deviant or subversive strains of thought. It's mind control. And this guy is telling it all. Share this. Alright, pause it, read it, share it, like, if you want to see more. Alright, love y'all, have a good night, or try to.
Imagine the Earth's atmosphere, also known as the ionosphere, as a thick soap bubble. It is a membrane, a natural electrically charged shield around the Earth, protecting all life from deadly solar radiation.
We have to have the atmosphere for survival. I don't think we should do anything to damage it.
Without the ionosphere, I'd be fried, you'd be fried. All life on Earth would be fried.
In 1912, Nikola Tesla, a visionary genius, saw ways to tame the sky, to make the atmosphere glow. He developed alternating current, high-frequency radio technology, and free energy. He experimented with both high and low frequencies and electromagnetic waves. He envisioned altering the weather and creating shields around the Earth to protect us from missiles, and he claimed he knew how to split the Earth in two. In 1985, Bernard Eastlund applied for patents that could make some of these ideas real. Many claim that these patents have become the blueprint for HARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
ARCO originally approached me in 1984 to find a use for the natural gas on the North Slope of Alaska, which they could not sell. To give you a feel for how much gas they asked me to find an application for, it was enough gas to produce all the electricity in the United States for a full year. I originated some ideas for military applications and beneficial civilian applications in which that gas would be converted into electricity and then used to power some gigantic antennas.
What does HARP do? HARP is a large antenna where we beam radio frequency energy up into the upper atmosphere, and we create on a small scale what the sun normally does. And the reason we're trying to do this is because when you have disturbances in the ionosphere, we can't communicate with our satellites.
HARP began with a congressional insertion in the appropriations bill of fiscal year 1990. In essence, Congress directed the Defense Department to explore the potential for using the auroral regions for improving communications and navigation and surveillance. From there, the assignment came that the Navy and the Air Force were to manage the program. It is people from those two organizations that have worked together for the past 7 years.
Applications discussed in the patents included destroying missiles. Communications control and disruption were included. There were some other ideas both to possibly modify weather, and finally to lift a portion of the upper atmosphere further out into space, where hopefully it would be able to deflect missile trajectories.
What we do by beaming up radio frequency up into the ionosphere, that radio frequency, when it hits molecules of atmosphere, it tends to make the subatomic particles inside move faster, and that increases their temperature. So you can bring their temperature up to 1,600 degrees or so, which is normally what the sun does to those particles at that atmosphere.
The ionosphere of the Earth has got enormous amount of energy. There are 8,000 thunderstorms going on all over the Earth at any given moment. There are millions of amperes of electricity pouring to the Earth from lightning strikes, and HAARP could create a trigger effect.
In 1983, I did radio tomography with 30 watts, looking for oil in the ground. I found 26 oil wells over a 9-state area, and 100% of the time was accurate with just 30 watts of power beaming straight into solid rock. HAARP uses 1 billion watts beamed straight into the ionosphere for experiments. Picture these strings on the piano as layers of the Earth. Each one has its own frequency. What we used to do is beam radio waves into the ground, and it would vibrate any strings that were present in the ground. We might get a sound back like, and we'd say, that's natural gas. We might get a sound back like, and we say that's crude oil. We were able to identify each frequency. We accomplished this with just 30 watts of radio power. If you do this with 1 billion watts, the vibrations are so violent that the entire piano would shake. In fact, the whole house would shake. In fact, the vibrations could be so severe underground that could even cause an earthquake.
While we feel that HAARP is a unique facility, it's not the only one like it in the world. HAARP has some capabilities that we feel are better than some of the others. You can change the frequencies. You can shift the beam so that you can move it from one part of the ionosphere to another, and it has quite a bit more power than some of the other facilities throughout the world that are doing the same kinds of research.
I chose what's called a phased array antenna for the patents because it can be aimed. Picture holding your microwave oven in your hands with the door open. Then you can move it around and send those microwaves different directions. And for these applications where I wanted precise control of where the power was, I felt that was the best type of antenna to use. And that is the kind that HAARP has built.
What we can do with an antenna is change the portion of the sky into which we insert the energy.
HAARP can create some of the effects that the sun creates that are similar to the aurora borealis.
HAARP can paint designs in the sky, if you will. You know, it can take the beam and move it in any pattern that the scientist who's doing an experiment might want to do.
What I'm holding in my hands is an electrodeless lamp. In it, I have a low atmosphere gas, somewhat similar to the atmosphere above the Earth. I'm now going to put this in the microwave oven, which will irradiate it with about 1 watt per square centimeter.
You know, you put 1 watt out and you've got the fields necessary to break down the air, or whatever happens.
And you see all of the motion of the plasma. That's typical of what will happen at high altitude, where the ionosphere gets irradiated with these big beams.
That was 1 watt per centimeter. HAARP focuses 3.6 million watts and squeezes it into a 1 billion watt or gigawatt beam.
We're squeezing the megawatts into a narrow beam. Then in a very tiny area, you can create what's it called, an effective gigawatt.
Lasers? Really? To change the weather?
Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Is HAARP safe? Yes, HAARP is safe.
The Earth is a web of interconnections. How do we know what we're doing when we blast the upper atmosphere with a huge amount of energy?
It takes a tiny, tiny amount of energy to release a huge amount of energy. It's the same as a bullet, for example. If you have the primer on the back of a bullet, and that primer releases a tiny amount of energy, but it triggers the larger power in the bullet itself. And HAARP is playing with the energy system of the Earth.
In the HAARP program, we have, I believe right now, 18 different colleges and universities that are working the program with us. University scientists are interested because they're studying science, and this is a major effect on the Earth, and so they want to know more about what it is and what it does.
HAARP has no effect on the Earth.
HAARP began in the 1980s when we were just beginning to learn about chaos theory, how a tiny stimulus can change the dynamics of a living system like the human body or the whole living Earth. I don't think the people who developed HAARP were even aware of that science or its impact in the life sciences. Today, our knowledge is much bigger about how tiny effects can drastically shift the health or well-being of a living thing.
It is possible with a big beam to take a part of that upper atmosphere and push it out for it.
What they're not paying any attention to is what's happening to the ionosphere while it's being held 80 miles out into space by this high-energy beam. It's heating up. And all of the molecules in that ionosphere region are absorbing energy out of that radio beam. And if they pick the right frequency to push that plume out into space, that energy may discharge back out of the ionosphere, back down the radio beam, and strike the Earth. And it would be about 100 times the energy released out of a thunderbolt. And that's how much energy would be released.
In certain applications, the military acknowledges that it can literally lift the ionosphere. And what they say is, it's not a problem, it's a short period of time. Yet, when you lift the ionosphere up, the lower atmosphere rushes in and fills that void, which changes localized weather patterns.
HAARP papers say that they intend to lift up a part of the ionosphere, which creates a hole, and they say that it heals over quickly. But what happens if you create enough holes that it just can't quite take care of it fast enough?
As far as creating a hole, to me, it's the analogy of you put your hand in water, and yeah, you're taking up space, but when you pull it out, it goes back together again. Same way the ionosphere would work.
If the hole means that the neutral density has been somewhat modified, then if you want to call that a hole, maybe that's fine.
The hole would be at least 30 miles long, half a mile deep, 50 to 60 miles above the Earth.
I imagine there are hundreds of satellites that have interactions with the ionosphere. They're all doing their own local modification of the ionosphere. They're all creating their own holes.
Satellites, rockets, space shuttle flights, not just HAARP, but many technologies out there in space are creating holes in heaven.
As to this question of injecting more high-energy particles into the Earth's electrical system, the ionosphere is a dynamic system, ever moving, ever changing. I don't think anyone on this planet really knows the point where enough is enough.
This was the planning document that really brought HAARP into being, and the absolute requirements ran from 1 gigawatt, which is 1 billion watts, all the way up to 10 billion watts of effective radiated power with a desired level of 100 billion watts.
At its biggest size suggested, if you beamed it for an hour and a half, that would equal the energy in a hydrogen bomb.
It's just a person's concept of what might possibly be done. Doesn't necessarily mean the government endorsed it or not.
What's the power when it pulses? And I can't find that in any of the documents that I've looked at. If you have a very small battery, you can put it in a small pen light and turn it on and have for some time a little bit of light. You can take the exactly same battery and put it in your camera. when you flash that camera, the light will blind you. The nature of radar and these electromagnetic supplies is they can usually be pulsed. So one very good question for people to ask is, what is the peak power of that antenna when it pulses at its full capability?
Because I've been hit by about a dozen hurricanes since I've lived here.
Oh yeah.
I wish they would control them a little better.
Exactly. And so, you were asking what is some of the good tech that could come out of this. Why aren't they steering the hurricanes away from the coast? Maybe the Russians are doing it. We always blame everything on the Russians. But it has a lot. It's also often by Dr. Nick Baggage focused on mind control over populations. What it really does, a lot of, at least the air, and it's run by the Air Force, Army, and Navy. It heats the ionosphere, which causes the current radar signals, ultra high frequency waves, to be able to cover the Earth. Now there's a electric gradient between ground, the Earth, and the ionosphere, ions. And then we are bathed in a magnetic field. Those two perpendicular fields, a lot of high energy physics, such as nuclear magnetic resonance imaging, occurs. We've turned the Earth into one giant MRI machine. So we can image underground bases. We can do a lot of things that people don't believe. They'll say the Boltzmann, I won't use scientific terms, they'll just say the thermal effect. You can't do MRIs under Earth's natural magnetic field. We've been doing it easily since the 60s in universities. So a recent article came out, wow, we can recover dreams and play them back, and we can read the inner vocabulary of somebody, what they're thinking, talking to themselves with their inner voice, using a functional nuclear magnetic resonance imaging machine, like in a hospital. But that's a higher resolution, but they just use new algorithms to do it. And it was very accurate for a bunch of people, which is interesting. They say it's new. Well, I mean, it's obviously not new, but...
Where they can read people's inner thoughts.
Yeah. So you think I don't know how you read. Some people read or think in images. We can read the images. Some people think in words. And it's about 60% to 40% of the population does one or the other.
And it's able to decipher each one.
Yeah. So some people will go through a grocery shopping list. Apple. I need toilet paper. I need this or that. And they think in the words. Those can be deciphered. Other people think the image when they create those lists. And so each one is a brain signature. And when you have a sample over a large enough population, you get just like Amazon's Echo. You can more voice samples they have.
Yeah.
And I worked on voice sampling technology way back when. Now it's so good. I mean, Alexa, it just amazes me that it can understand human language without any practice.
Right.
Because they've had so many samples. Well, similarly, we need more brain samples, and that's part of the reason, I think, for a lot of this experimentation on the public, random people. I'm trying to link it all back together.
So, Len, when you went to West Virginia and you went to this place that had no connection to any cell towers, there was no phone signal anywhere, and you had this attack, what specifically happened to you? Like, what can you walk me through how these attacks, like how they affect you, what happens, how long they last, etc.?
Just like I said before, it starts very suddenly. It's vibration. It's high pressure in the head, and your whole body vibrates, deafening sound. You get disoriented.
Your whole body
vibrates.
Can you describe the sound that you hear? Is it like someone in the cartoons hitting a pot around your head?
It's like high pitch electronic tinnitus.
Yeah,
like tinnitus.
Yeah, tinnitus.
But suddenly on, suddenly off.
Suddenly on, suddenly off.
Yeah.
And it just grabs you, and you also hear voices.
Yeah.
The voices, V2K is a part of it. In Havana Syndrome, I sent you that clip. The very first reporting by CNN, they said that people hear noises and voices.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, there was it was not part of any reporting. But the very first report on CNN contained that information.
Special report will be taking a closer look at one of the most controversial health mysteries in recent years. CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta investigates a cluster of unexplained concussion-like symptoms first reported among American officials and covert personnel in Cuba back in 2016. Sanjay spoke to the CIA's first investigator into the situation, Dr. Paul Andrews, who himself became a victim when he traveled to Havana to investigate. This is a preview.
When Andrews and his two colleagues landed in Havana in April of 2017, the incidents were still classified. Patients were told to not even discuss this with their own families.
We had a van from the embassy pick us up and take us to the hotel. I get into the room and I looked around. I hadn't seen this before. Between every set of rooms was a small door, and it was a service chase. It was unusual.
Did you think there was somebody in that space?
I don't know.
This is that service chase, potentially large enough for a person to stand inside.
I looked out the window. I was on a high floor, and I saw nothing out there that concerned me. There was no other building at a height that would have a direct ability to shine something in my room, say. I think I went to bed probably around 11:30. I slept in my jeans and a t-shirt in case I had to evacuate quickly. And about 4:56, 4:57, I was awakened with severe pain in my right ear. I had a lot of nausea and a terrible headache, and I never suffered from headaches before. The amount of ringing in my ears was just astounding. And things were getting worse and worse and worse. And I started to hear the noise, and I'm really in disbelief.
And you believe that that night there was some sort of injury or damage to either your inner ear, the nerves around your inner ear, or your brain?
Correct. Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us now. Sanjay, in that 2-minute clip, already more information and explanation than I've heard since this began in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, just to hear someone actually describe these unexplained health incidents, what transpires, somebody who never had these symptoms before suddenly comes on, no advance warning and no indication. I mean, concussion-like symptoms without a blow to the head. That's why they call this, that's why we're calling it the immaculate concussion. You know, it's hard to explain, but you hear from somebody who's a physician himself, goes to investigate, and develops that.
Okay, so why? I mean, do you get to the why or how or what's really going on?
So, people think that hearing voices is a sign of psychiatric disorder, right. But it just takes a little bit of education to understand this Frey effect, this microwave hearing has been around for a long time, has been known, and voice modulation has been demonstrated in the 70s. There's published literature about it, that you can modulate the signal and it produces.
I was awakened with severe pain in my right ear. I had a lot of nausea and a terrible headache, and I never suffered from headaches before. The amount of ringing in my ears was just astounding. And things were getting worse and worse and worse. And I started to hear the noise, and I'm really in disbelief.
And you believe that that night there was some sort of injury or damage to either your inner ear, the nerves around your inner ear, or your brain.
Correct. Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us now. Sanjay, in that 2-minute clip, already more information and explanation than I've heard since this began in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, just to hear someone actually describe these unexplained health incidents, what transpires, somebody who never had these symptoms before suddenly comes on, no advance warning and no indication. I mean, concussion-like symptoms without a blow to the head. That's why they call this, that's why we're calling it the immaculate concussion. You know, it's hard to explain, but you hear from somebody who's a physician himself, goes to investigate, and develops that.
Okay, so why? I mean, do you get to the why or how or what's really going on?
So, people think that hearing voices is a sign of psychiatric disorder,
Right.
but it just takes a little bit of education to understand this Frey effect, this microwave hearing has been around for a long time, has been known, and voice modulation has been demonstrated in the 70s. There's published literature about it, that you can modulate the signal and it produces
Dr. Lin from the University of Chicago.
Yeah,
Dr. Lin
Yeah,
from the
at
University
LIN.
of Chicago.
He has a setup where he demonstrates the microwave hearing effect, that he pulses it. The person who's standing in the middle of the signal where it's focused can hear it. And he does it on himself, and that scares me. I mean, he's heating up his brain, he's listening to these clicks, these chirps, as you know, they're called by the CIA or the diplomats, I'm sorry, that get hit. And yeah, that's a sign of the microwave hearing effect, and it creates small little micro concussions over time.
And what specific voices, like what do the voices say?
All the derogatory stuff, and I don't want to acknowledge it, don't want to give it credence, but it's one of those kind of shaming, derogatory, very negative, just.
Yeah, if you have, everyone has an ego. They will go through the most common ones first. You know, let's say you're a woman and you're concerned about your breast size. Well, they'll go after that. Or
so they're going at individuals specifically.
Yeah,
like
and so
your specific insecurities.
Yeah. Yes. No, but first they have to do a broad approach to find out what your insecurities
It doesn't seem like time or cost effective.
How
would you go about, if you were doing this to millions of people, how would
you
have
scale it?
How would you have the time to go through each person, find out this person's overweight, this person is short, and be able to specifically tailor a voice to them?
I'll explain that. Think of it as a lie detector machine. It knows your stress levels. It can read them. You can do that from many different brain signals, but the P300 is a recognition signal, for example. It's just a term that's used for a specific strong effect after a stimulus, if there's recognition. But if it's a lie detector test, whatever polygraph, we'll say those, you can defeat those with a little practice.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, polygraphs are bullshit.
Yeah, they're total bullshit. But you can imagine, okay, so this is some form of a lie detector test, but maybe it uses heart rate and, can measure, some other factors other than necessarily neuronal ones. But whatever bothers you, it will continue doing. So let's say this is a robot, chat bot that's very convincing, voice morphing, and we're the NSA, we sampled your, I don't know anything about your family, so hopefully your great-grandfather, he's dead, right? So we can bring him back to life. We can use his voice. we can voice morph them, and we can project it, and we'll say using the microwave hearing effect with a robot. We will go through, it doesn't matter if you had a good relationship with them or bad, we're going to turn them into a bad guy. Let's say you know, you're going to respect them or something. I know this is a very off the wall kind of scenario, but they make it much more personal than that.
So whose voice do you hear?
Tell them.
My family.
Your family's
My
voice.
family. They live in Germany. They speak Russian and German. I speak Russian, bad Russian now, and English. So all my V2K is in Russian.
What?
It is, yes.
It's multilingual.
It's my mother, my father, my brother, and his wife. And they all talk about my lifestyle choices, everything derogatory. And I know it's not them, it's artificial intelligence, because nobody talks 24/7, because my V2K is 24/7. I sleep in noise canceling headphones, and I play voice audiobooks nonstop, so my brain would concentrate on that rather than on what's being projected into my brain.
Does it help at all? What helps? What helps you cope with this the most? What have you done? What have you tried?
Distracting. Sometimes I have to use my own voice. I have to talk to somebody. The second it stops, the second the silence begins, the voices come back. And they also use something like, if you have some kind of white noise, like a fan or a AC,
yeah,
it rides on it. It piggybacks on those frequencies.
It's called EEG heterodyning. So the nerve cells from your ears to your brain can also be stimulated. So if there's a nice background noise, broad spectrum, it can even be pink noise, which means lower noise spectrum. It can amplify a recognition signal, like a voice. I always like using the talking guitar. Remember that song? Who does that? And it's a guitar that sounds like it talks to the audience. I'm spacing who does that, but it was very unique at the time. What it's doing is it's heterodyning a voice signal onto the guitar. Well, now imagine heterodyning someone's voice onto nerve signals of a background noise. And that's what's going on with projecting voices into, let's say, fans, refrigerator noises, street noises. But my favorite one was that I heard about was a woman who could hear voices, and this was on television, and she ended up doing some bad things, but she could hear Rice Krispies talk to her. I was like, oh yeah, that's background noise. Yeah. That would make sense. So it's eerie. It's something you have to experience. And I was going to make a machine to do that, to try to demonstrate it to the common man. And I just, I have so many projects I'm working on, never got around to it. But
it's hard to imagine that somebody would do something like that to you, but it is, and the first thought that probably comes to your mind is that there's something wrong with me psychiatrically. Yeah, I mean, this is, if I didn't know about the existence of this technology, this would be my guess, that this person developed delusional disorder. This is a paranoid schizophrenia. But first of all, nobody develops paranoid schizophrenia in their 50s. This is, if you haven't developed it by 30, it's not. Then this technology exists. These nefarious programs exist. And it's hard to imagine for a person that, why would you do something like this? But if you think about the new type of warfare,
cognitive warfare.
Exactly. It's a cognitive warfare. You don't have to kill people that you are fighting against. You can just degrade their brain. You can
you alter their minds.
Yeah, alter their minds,
personalities,
and it's like Chinese torture. I mean, this. Yeah. Okay. So whatever they're talking to your head, into your head, just ignore it. You can't. It's 24/7. It's nonstop, and it's accompanied by these attacks that make you so vulnerable.
Read them the definition of directed energy weapons. Oh, you may not have it in front of it, but it's kind of interesting.
You can pull it up.
I sent it to you to
and
drop it.
The definition of directed energy weapons.
Weapons, what systems. They use, systems. And
directed energy weapon systems.
And what they say in this particular definition was interesting, that it's disablement of personnel. Now, how could you disable a person? Okay, most people think directed energy, a laser beam. Okay, you burn them a few times. That's not really disabling them. Making them dysfunctional, that would be scrambling their brains. That'd be dopamine dumps. That would be making, concussion weapons. That would be somehow affecting their nervous system so they drop on the ground. So it's a combination of psychological warfare as well as directed energy weapons, along with the voice of God weapons, with voice morphing, with artificial intelligence chatterbots. It's the most complex weapon system we have put together ever as a species.
Wow. And do you think this is something that the United States is working on because other nations are working on it as well? Is it a competitive thing?
Yeah, it's very.
Is it like an internal governmental control thing?
There was something called Project Paperclip, where we split up German scientists.
Operation Paperclip.
Paperclip.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
We talk about all the rocket scientists we got, put them into NASA and other programs. We don't talk about
the Nazi scientists.
Yeah, we don't talk about the mind scientists we got. Those were kind of classified. That's where a lot of this research started. Now, if we got half of them, so did the Russians. So it's been we compete with, our intercontinental ballistic missiles. Of course, we're going to compete with cognitive warfare, total control of the mind. CIA agent called Mark Phillips, he's unfortunately passed away. He did a lot of work on exposing this type of world domination through psychological warfare. And he also helped a woman whose name is, Kathy. All I can remember is Kathy. And she and he helped her out of the program, deprogrammed her, and some other things. And they wrote a book together. It's very popular.
Mind manipulation techniques that they're using. I know for a fact that the plan is to make all of us feel totally helpless. That what's happening is beyond our realm to affect because we've been taken over by aliens. That our Independence Day is dawning. So beware of that. Understand that those criminals have been keeping information and technology from us under their blanket of national security. They are 25 years ahead of us at least, technologically. Can you imagine what they've got now? 25 years ahead? What's happened that you're aware of in the last 25 years? Microwave ovens, we've got computerization, and they've had access to all of that to continue their own advancements. They're way ahead. So when they say, it's aliens, and they show us some incredible technology, don't fall into the trap of feeling totally helpless, that this is beyond our realm to affect. Superstition begins where knowledge leaves off. And they have been keeping knowledge from us for a long time. People have all kinds of belief systems, and I'm sure each and every one of you has various and different belief systems as well. Regardless of what your belief system is, it is imperative that you know that these criminals are people. They are within our realm to affect. They need to be held accountable for their actions and their crimes against humanity.
Yeah, that's about all I can say for now.
Len, when you talk to other people who have experienced the same thing you have and that are going through the same thing, do you guys do anything to, or do you guys talk about things to do to be proactive in sort of mitigating the effects of this happening to you guys and to people in the future, to multiple people? Is there a way to deter this, or is there a way to avoid this from happening?
This has to become a political issue. The politicians have to, the government first of all, the government has to acknowledge that this is happening to civilians, not just to the diplomats and spies overseas. It is happening domestically. My case can be swept under the rug. I have every expert that I've seen. I have a validated case, as validated as those diplomats that are listed in the intelligence report. The latest intelligence report on the subject was issued on February 1st of this year. It's a joint report of the Office of DNI, Director of National Intelligence, and CIA, and they said 24 cases we can't explain, and the most plausible explanation is directed pulse microwave energy. I am exactly in that category. My case is validated. I have brain damage. I have vestibular damage, and the agency that's supposed to investigate it is the FBI. Because I'm a civilian, it's happening domestically. They ignore it. I went to my congresswoman. She brought an inquiry to the FBI, and they basically responded with a nonsensical letter that something that there are no facts that any law is broken or something, or it's under our jurisdiction. I am a civilian. My brain is accessed remotely and damaged on the regular basis. In 3.5 years, you look at my brain scan and it looks like a battlefield. All those delta connection, all this broken connection, the connectivity, my vestibular organs are shot. If I close my eyes, I stand up, close my eyes, I will fall.
So he asked what else we're doing and in order to stop this. And a lot of us do research, jammers on certain frequencies, on certain patterns, seems to help some.
Jammers,
that means with the electromagnetic signal, electro and magnetic in the ELF wave range or other ranges people have found, it gives them some relief. It blocks the tinnitus. Even if they're not a targeted individual, what could explain a frequency or set of a pattern, an algorithm that would turn off tinnitus for people? I mean, great. You were talking about economic advantage. I mean, even if it has nothing to do with this, half the public suffers from tinnitus,
right?
Or tinnitus, as you like to call it. We protested. When I say we, I mean the people that I represent, in front of the White House, and writing all the congressmen, every imaginable thing you can imagine, getting hold of newspapers and writing the FBI, which is funny. Yesterday, there was an article or a piece that came out. It said the FBI is now being attacked by the
Right, I saw that. Yeah, in Miami, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You sent me that.
Right, and the attorney who represents victims.
I sent you that article, by the way.
Mark Zaid. He repeatedly he had several statements and about this being a government cover-up, and what he means by it is that the government knows what's going on, and the government would not acknowledge any domestic cases, neither with federal happening to federal employees or civilians, and the government needs to acknowledge it. Then it needs to investigate it, and it needs to stop it, because I am a part of general public, and my message is, if it can happen to me, my brain can be remotely accessed and damaged. It can happen to anyone, because I'm literally nobody. I'm just happen to be on the radar. They probably got a sample of my DNA, and DNA has resonant frequency. This is just like a tuning fork. It will vibrate if the frequency is correct. Well, every molecule has a resonant frequency, and DNA is just another molecule that unique to you. Therefore, the resonant frequency is also unique to you.
You can basically do anything with synthetic RNA, DNA. It's like a computer program. So, I mean, I think with enough, with effort, that's not too crazy. You could probably stop aging, reverse it if you want. You could turn someone into a freaking butterfly if you want with the right DNA sequence.
DNA is a storage medium. In other words, it's a hard drive. You're a walking hard drive, your body. 1 gram of DNA, this is science, peer-reviewed science, by the way, guys. 1 gram of DNA, which is enough to put a little tiny drop on the tip of your finger, can store 700 terabytes of data. I'm not talking about, etherical data or mystical data. I'm talking about real zeros and ones that make your phone work and make your computer work. Zeros and one bits of data, zeros and ones, can be stored on DNA.
DNA is highly programmable, just like a computer, and we can program a whole range of complex behaviors using DNA molecules.
DNA is the hard drive, the memory in every cell of every living organism is a digital storage medium. It's a sequence of a discrete alphabet, 4 letters, and if we could manipulate some DNA, we could put a message in there.
So these scientists, the main one, George Church, and Chris Shuri, those two actually together, are partners and scientists, they discovered this and they downloaded one of their books, one of their ebooks onto the DNA, and then they uploaded it from the DNA back to the server again. They was like, whoa, wait a minute. You can encode digital bits of information directly onto DNA and upload it back again. What does that mean? Well, we're walking USB drives, literally. Now, here's what's really amazing about that. They then took that same ebook, downloaded it back to the DNA again, and said, let's see how much we can go. They replicated the book 70 billion times in 1 gram of DNA. 70 billion copies of an ebook in 1 gram with 433 petabytes of data. That would be enough hard drives, if we were using conventional hard drives, to fill up this whole park. Think about that. In one tiny drop, inside of your body right now, you can store 13.5 billion years of data. Ironically, that's how old the universe is. So, you are the universe. You literally have all the information stored in your body from the beginning of time until this very moment, inside of you. So when people say the universe is in you, it's not just a figure of speech. Like, the universe is really in you, because all bits of data and particles, all bits of particles are all recycled over and over. All atoms are recycled. Everything is recycled. Everything that was here from the beginning is here right now. Nothing's been added. Nothing's been removed. Due to the law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. You're just here right now in this particular form at this particular moment. But all the information in your DNA will go back, if you had the capability of decoding it, will allow you to find this out. So we know that DNA is a storage medium, and it can store a massive amount of information. This is very, very important for you to understand. And like I said, on 1 gram of DNA, 433 petabytes of data. I don't know if you know what a petabyte is, but it's a massive amount of information. But let's take it to the next step now. Now they have discovered that epigenetic memories can be passed down 14 generations inside of DNA.
DNA is made up of what? 5 elements, right? Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and oxygen. You know how they're arranged? The phosphorus sits right here in the middle, and you've got 4 oxygen atoms surrounding it. Then there's another phosphorus, 2 more oxygen atoms. Now these are the legs of that double helix. These are the legs. Now the ladder steps on it, they become the adenine, the guanine, the cytosine, and thymine, the ATCGs. It turns out hydrogen, they used to think that energy, the body transferred or understood the energy information through electricity. They're finding out it's through frequency. Well, guess what hydrogen sounds like? It's a key of E, and it's the color yellow. That's what proper physics gets you to. Oxygen is a chartreuse, and it's the key of F over F sharp. Now they used to, like I said, information used to be thought about as just electrical information passing on. But I've got a question for you. Have you ever been at a party with some of your friends you ain't seen in 10 years, but y'all was like 14, you hung out and there's a song that came on and you was like, and everybody got up and was live at that moment. Now say 10 years later you got a friend with you. He's a good guy, but he wasn't there when me and my boys formed this. So when that song comes on, our DNA tightens. There's a particular song, a scale in the genomes for each and every one of us. Now, when that song is played, when your particular prime resonant frequency is played, guess what happens? Your DNA celebrates and tightens. Everything else gets pushed out. Harmonic wave resequencing. The carbon is also the key of E and yellow. The nitrogen is G. And all these play a song. So say that the F over F sharps of the oxygen, the green, is only hitting at an F. Why? Because there's another frequency coming in from a generator over there. That's changing and causing it to change. The F hits the carbon, so instead of hitting as an F sharp, it hits as an F, so when it hits the carbon at an E, it doesn't hit it quite right, so the domino don't file right. So the next domino hits wrong. And so now we have malformation happening within our DNA because the frequencies are being pushed off. But when we hear our tone, we tighten back up. So yeah, I'm in the process of building the harmonic wave resequencer with another doctor who has been able to successfully cure AIDS and cancer. And it's well underway. But I wanted you guys to understand how that works. It's so simple. You do not need to tear the human body apart when all you can do is use frequency to bring it back to its normal space.
Every letter is a word because these letters, they have a meaning. So you'll notice if you've done any kind of research, you'll know that there's a number put on letters or a number value that letters have. When you start seeing people do numerology and certain things, these letters have a number, which really is a frequency. So what happens is when you speak these letters, the frequency resonates with your cells within your vessel or your DNA. This is why we speak about being very careful about the words that come out of your mouth, because everything you say resonates and has a resonant frequency with your DNA. So when you speak, you are literally writing your DNA. You're writing what's happening in your third dimension.
The human genome is connected to a frequency band of information. We really can connect to harmonic intelligence, we can say, via our own genome. And DNA is both expressed vibrationally and affected by vibration. This again connects to scalar energy potentiality, and really our DNA is played like music. And we can think of ourselves as real energetic and musical orchestras, because the way that our DNA is expressed is through the language of frequency and resonance. So if we want to change our genomic expression, we need to change the way that we physically synthesize and play our DNA. And there are some incredible scientists that have done work on this. One of my most favorite fields to examine is the field of linguistic wave genetics. There was a Russian scientist named Peter Garyaev who looked into specifically how we can change the transcription of DNA factors by allowing ourselves to experience frequency differently. And he physically did some experiments which were so profound in nature when he would scan actually people's photographs and produce a white noise, a kind of frequency, which was then audible to the human, connecting them to their healthy selves. So imagine taking a photograph of a young person, scanning that through a machine that picks up the frequency information connected to that actual photograph, and then beaming that back to the individual to allow their DNA to recall the memory of who they were prior to the manifestation of their physical chronic conditions, disease factors, or anything else that's leading to their now more, unhealed version of self. Why is this possible? So essentially this brings us to the space of morphogenetic physics. This is a really complex field to move into because it looks at the understanding of the human as part of a holographic field of information, where we actually have a morphic field surrounding the self. That morphic field holds the information vibrationally that allows for the physical transcription of the genes, that allows us to express ourselves. It holds the memory and the operating system for the physical being expression. And so think of it, if we were to experience ourselves now in an unhealed state, that means that something went awry between the connection of our morphic field and the physical self, where when we're born, our cells somehow know how to express themselves. There is that program which is allowing for healthy human functioning. If we connect back to that morphic field, which requires being in a certain harmonic range of coherence, then we can experience ourselves in that healthy state. And so there are now scalar technologies, scalar energy, plasma technologies, and different sound healing modalities which allow us to come into a state of coherence by vibrationally reconnecting with our own morphic fields. And so everybody has a different kind of a song that their DNA plays. And so I believe that we will be moving into a time in the future when we can physically use healing tracks, potentially even music orchestrated for the body's genomic code, which will allow for healthy functioning of the cells, purely individualized based on the program that you individually express as a human being, which is something connected to your own holographic blueprint. And every, your DNA and your genome actually expresses itself as the music of prime numbers. So this gets into a very complex field of understanding, actually, of how can this DNA potential be expressed as part of the binary code and part of a complex system of understanding how everything connects to a frequency, to a musical note, to a number, and that complex patterning allows for the transcription of a healthy genome. So this is obviously a rabbit hole to go down, but it's one that I think is a very promising field as we step into this holistic space in the future and explore more about the connection between energy, vibrational phenomena, and the human organism. Because really, there's no junk DNA as in terms of there are like random aspects of the DNA template which don't provide any functioning for the human. The junk DNA that we typically associate as being unnecessary is just unexplored potential. This is matter that needs to be decoded into unexpressed human potentiality. I think as we move more into the space of understanding the deep connection between vibrational phenomena and the human self, we can unlock certain dormant DNA possibilities, which just intuitively I feel connects to ESP, extrasensory perception, and different higher strand DNA potentiality, which might be just unexpressed aspects of our genomic code.
So just like we can find from a satellite, scanning and, visually we can, I think in the 70s they were bragging, we can see a license plate from a satellite, but it doesn't have to be a visual. You can just scan for frequency. You can find that frequency just like you can find your cell phone anywhere on the planet, because we have full satellite coverage. We have access through this.
That's the best analogy I've heard, is put all your cell phones in a big bag. Why does only one ring? Because of resonance frequencies. Everything is resonance. And that's what Tesla...
What do you mean, why does only one? If you put all your cell phones in a bag...
And someone dials a phone number, only that phone number will ring.
Right, okay.
Why is that? And so people kind of wonder, how can you target a single human or a single brain amongst the whole room of people.
Right.
And that's just a good analogy.
You guys were talking about something about twins, about maternal or paternal twin children.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying.
With the same DNA.
If that theory is correct, and it's a theory because I haven't studied it, that you can tune in altered DNA patterns, and I don't see why not. You couldn't do that. But the first thing I would do is go find, identical twins,
right?
Find out if they are being targeted when they're in the same room, or if you can find a pair that one is targeted and one is not. And why would that be? They have identical DNA. So it's still a theory at this point that he's projecting.
Yeah, it's a speculation, and the other way to find somebody by their brain signature. Also, just you scan the area, and whatever resonates, you get the signal back. That's your target, and you apply that energy to that target, which is a human brain.
Yeah, there are actually several modalities and methods and techniques that we can use to alter brain patterns and stimulate the nervous system. It's usually done on monkeys. You can find the research from the Navy and other organizations that sponsored some of these horrific things on life that feels pain. And our history isn't that great, isn't pleasant when things are exposed. There are 100 other things going on that haven't been.
So the idea with individuals, in specific, people like Len, people like the lawyer in I think it was Tallahassee, is that you can use this sort of artificial intelligence voice in the head to break down the ego and control an individual to perform certain acts.
Ultimately, yes. And in Project Soul Catch, I referred to a Myron May, right, as a psychobomb. They didn't care who the target was. They were just trying to make him explode and do something bad.
And if the problem is, if these people do explode and do something bad like this, there's absolutely no way to prove that there has been any sort of manipulation to the brain. In this guy's case, he talked about it. I mean, obviously he talked,
but it was covered up.
The way they write the article, he sounds like a crazy person.
Yeah, that's part of plausible deniabilities and direction.
That's another fascinating thing with the CIA is the use of conspiracies to sort of create stigma around certain things, certain technologies or certain topics, whether, for example, if they are working on something, they want to create stigma and create conspiracy theories around certain things to sort of use that as a weapon against that idea.
Yeah. And in fact, the Homeland Security now, Biden has weaponized them, that there are dangerous conspiracies and we got to stop these. And
that's another, yes.
So your broadcasts, we may all be arrested. I don't know. This might be a dangerous conspiracy. Or we're telling the truth and we're saving lives because knowledge. If you have knowledge ahead of time, Len, would you have gone through as much pain? I mean, you would have been able better to cope early on. Right. So we're trying to spread awareness and knowledge of, that it's a machine and not your actual family, let's say, berating you. And mind control is so powerful in these weapons and voice to God. I mean, you have no ability to discern, like looking at a television, what goes into your mind. It is directly stimulating those neurons to think that. So, I mean, is bypassing your peripheral vision. Some people can see through their third eye, and that's called in psychology the visual workspace. Some people can smell artificial things, taste artificial things. All the senses have been bypassed, like in the movie The Matrix. They're literally plugged in to a synthetic controlled reality that they cannot differentiate from their external bodily senses.
Do you have any reason to believe that organizations like the CIA have used stigma as a tool to discredit these kind of conversations?
It's unfortunate. We had laws, I think, passed in the 70s that PSYOPs by our military, Pentagon, CIA, etc., could not be done to the American public, because that's kind of ruining the whole idea of democracy. But that was reversed after 9/11 and some other events since. So I mean, it's just the game of war games that all countries play with each other, and of course they're going to do it. I just don't like that they're doing it to my population. And is there evidence that they've been doing it? Yes, it's everywhere. And what I do a lot
it's
of times,
everywhere.
Yeah, and a lot of times what I do in my research, because I'm a scientist, is I'll go through the patent office, let's say, and there's obvious economic good science that's going to lead somewhere, and then a big black space. I look in those black spaces. Why isn't there more research there? It went dark. The patents were pulled. The research went dark. There are a lot of examples that, and this is the biggest one for me that woke me up from the Matrix, is this technology is world changing. And people are complaining about it everywhere. And, the news won't cover it. I mean, that is a huge cover up, and all they have to say is, you're crazy. And then the response is, well, maybe you're just dumb. There are two forms of, you can be an ultimate skeptic, which will get you nowhere, or you can be totally, gullible. And those are two extremes. And just do, your research, and you'll see all this. What do you think, Glenn?
I think the biggest problem is people can't imagine how much this neuroscience advanced, how much it matured, what the possibilities are. It is often described as science fiction, but it is totally real. It's real, and every neuroweapon expert, from Giordano to McRae to Krishnan and their colleagues, are saying this is no longer science fiction. This is a reality you have to accept, and we have to deal with it. That the civilian population is attacked. The technology exists. Your brain can be accessed remotely, damaged remotely, and we need to have a public conversation about it.
Let me ask you, Danny, don't you think Hollywood and a lot of movies and et cetera are slowly getting the next generation ready to accept this kind of technology? There are so many movies made about it, and but they're in the realm of science fiction. It would be a good way to, we just developed this technology, and so and maybe it can cure mental illness. This is my hypothesis. They're going to stop it one day. They're going to say, we have neurotechnology that can retrain the brain out of its dysfunctional patterns. Suddenly they just, they quit torturing the people, the TIs, and they don't do anymore. And they just say, well, it's because we found a cure. And that's how they're going to excuse all the past atrocities. This is called a Mentacost, which is menticide, the killing of the mind, and it's done on a mass scale, a Mentacust. And I think they're going to get away with it. I really do. I know that's depressing, but I don't think we're going to be able to expose this, because it will create anarchy if people believe it.
How many weapons, how many different projects like this are going on right now that are completely hidden from the public, that the public has no idea about? So things like what we're talking about right now, people are aware of it. People have been aware of it for a while. People have been talking about Havana syndrome for a while. Nothing has been done really, but I mean, things like this, people are at least aware of. How many more things are there beneath the surface that people don't have any idea about?
They're all interconnected. I mean, wars about ultimately controlling the enemy. The book, The Art of War, is, an excellent short read. And it's to make your enemy believe you're near when you are far. It's to believe you are weak when you are strong. It's to believe you are, unorganized when you're very smart and strategic. And so they play all these games along with the torture scripts right out of the books on the target. And they make them believe that their neighbor with a ray gun is doing it to them, or a van. You are near when you're actually far. And all they have to do is jump on an airplane, find out, and we'll follow them anywhere. How many projects? They're so integrated. They're numerous. But you see the beginnings of them. I remember as a child, I made a maser. Maser's like a laser. The M just stands for microwave amplification of stimulated emission radiation. But now we really have guns like that, and the Navy just had hooked up a big argon laser that shoots down missiles on their ships. So you can see the beginnings oftentimes.
What is there's something called like Project Blue Beam?
Yeah, good one.
What is that?
That's
lasers, right?
Yeah, I can actually talk about that one, but that is it's really bad. But the people that see orbs in the sky.
Yeah.
Go around that fly faster.
UFOs?
UFOs.
Yeah, there's Navy pilots. There's multiple Navy pilots who talk about them. They got so they were flying F-18s, these Navy pilots, and one of them's coming in here in 2 weeks. He's Ryan Graves.
Okay.
He's a Navy pilot flying off the coast of North Carolina, and they got their radar upgraded on their F-18s, and all of a sudden they were seeing these things darting around on their radar.
Okay. Don't tell him what I'm about to say and see if he knows about it.
Okay.
So what we do is we play with our own forces to make sure our trickery will work on the enemy. And those are directed energy weapons of where we do intersecting beams or focus beams into the atmosphere. And notice they're always in the atmosphere to excite the electron orbitals of the oxygen and nitrogen in our atmosphere. It causes a glow and it causes ionization. That ionization shows up on radar and it's like a cat laser pointer, and we're making planes chase them.
That's exactly how they describe these things moving, like laser pointers.
Yeah, and so we can do it in 3 space. We can make it look like
in 3-dimensional space.
Yeah, and we can make it look like an entire fleet is about to drop bombs on, let's say, Europe, and then just have them disappear. And they get all their planes up in the air, and we attack them from the other direction, assuming we're attacking Europe.
Who is doing this? The Navy, you said?
Somebody. Let's just say a group.
And you know this for a fact.
I know for a fact, yeah. So anyway, don't tell your guests.
A group within the U.S. government.
Yeah, okay, we'll leave it at that. Yes.
And is this something that could be seen with the naked eye, or
yes,
is this something
because
that
it glows? It glows. So it would be seeable. You can see it by the naked eye, and it would leave a radar trace. So it's perfect as a deception.
Now, have you heard of the accounts of these things going underwater? These things come out of the water, zip around, they fly. There's been accounts of these things going in between when there's two F-18s flying in formation. One of them, they're described as, one of them specifically, which Ryan Graves describes as a sphere with a cube inside, and each apex of the cube is touching the sphere.
Okay, no, I don't know about that technology.
Okay.
So that's different. I know you can make this appear as it goes in water, but it wouldn't have the shape of a cube. You can make them cigar shape. You can alter it somewhat. And I've worked on holography quite a bit, but nothing is detailed.
Holograms?
Yeah, holograms in three-dimensional space. There's a Japanese company, so I can talk about, they use femto pulsed lasers to create touchable holograms, tiny little laser beams that excite the air and in their midpoints, and then create different colors. Even with
now, is this something that they would be able to do
on a massive scale,
100 miles offshore?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think so, but I'm saying they can just create, little orbs and split them up and make them do cool things, and the razzle dazzle, shocking off, back to war.
Right.
And you asked me about Project Bluebeam. Well, that's what it's about, and it involves the voice of God weapons that I was talking about.
Project Bluebeam does.
And this got leaked, so it probably won't have the effect, and they probably won't do it. But if you wanted to bring the world together, as President Reagan said in several UN speeches, you would have a common enemy, like evil aliens attacking. We forget our differences and we fight against it.
So we wouldn't look at each other as Chinese or Russian or American. We'd look at each other as Earthlings.
As humans, as Earthlings. And so that was Project Bluebeam, was to trick the human race into believing either God is coming down, everybody hears the voice of God, the microwave hearing effect, get along, give whatever the new message is, or it was going to be the evil aliens attacking. And notice how they, all of a sudden, all the governments release all their information on UFOs, and there's a whole division dedicated, and that's just deception. It's just,
you think it's all deception?
I think it's all deception.
Really?
Yeah. But that's my opinion. I've looked at all the videotapes and that people have given me, and I can explain away each one of them.
So apparently, but there's apparently lots of footage and videos and photos that have not been released to the public.
Yeah, I haven't seen those, so I can't give.
And if you think this is all some sort of psyop, what do you think the ultimate purpose of it is?
Distraction against a lot of this human experimentation we're doing.
Distraction.
Remember I told you the people I interview, they're actually told we're evil aliens and we're doing this to you. Some of them are.
People that are dealing with something similar.
Exactly.
How many people have you interviewed personally?
2,500, roughly.
2,500.
Yeah. So I have a good sample point of all the trickery they use on their targets.
Now, when you do these interviews, do you sit down in person with all of them?
No, a lot of them over the phone or internet.
Okay.
Some are.
Do you record them?
No, I respect people's privacy immensely, and I always worry.
They don't give you permission to record it?
Some of them do, and I say, no, I'm not leaving any trace that if I'm a little paranoid, but if I get raided, I don't want anyone's name attached to me. That was just my policy, and it's like any good shrink. You keep people's privacy.
So with artificial intelligence, the way it's evolving in the military sector and in the commercial sector, if there's no accountability or transparency for the development of this kind of technology, how is it possible to be optimistic about the future of humanity?
Let's just say this is a catastrophic evolutionary event of the human race. I don't think it can be stopped. There's a weapon system, acronym SATAN, Silent Assassination Through Adaptive Networks, and that's neural networks, which is artificial intelligence, or social networks. Very complex system, but it's a combination of tactics as well as artificial manipulation. I do not think the future looks good for humans the way we are. Now, you could go the Klaus Schwab way. We genetically engineer everyone to be happy with nothing, or using mind control, we stimulate the 7 pleasure centers of the brain while people work and are productive. And if they're not, we give them a little pain and behavioral modify the human race that way. So they're happy little slaves. I mean, there are a whole bunch of ways this could turn out, but humans will not be the same.
So you're not optimistic about the future?
No, I'm not. And that's assuming we don't kill ourselves. Nuclear war is looming. It's a very real possibility. Putin might want to take the world with him. It's hard to know what will happen. We have, I don't even know if this is public knowledge, but we have something like 1,300 class 3 pathogenic bioweapons development labs in the U.S. alone. How about another leak like we had in Wuhan, perhaps? I don't know if that.
There's so many possibilities. There's so many possibilities. And just getting into the fringe of neuro weapons and lasers is something that boggles my mind. But it seems like nukes are a primitive weapon compared to what we have now.
Yeah, everyone can build a nuke. We monitor the world, make sure they're not. In fact, that's why we got into the war with Iraq, is we had bad intel. We thought they were actually purifying uranium, weapons of mass destruction, et cetera. That was our justification.
To the public.
Yeah. The CIA denies it and said, no, they told them those parts that they bought were not for purifying uranium or plutonium. Anyway, that's their internal battle. It's a primitive weapon and no one wants to use them because it destroys buildings, property, stuff. What they want to do is change the people's culture or mind. That's a competition of that. That would be the best weapon. That's why mind-controlled weapons or neural weapons and cognitive weapons are everyone's racing to do. Now, you can still use bullets and bombs, so that destroys buildings as well. You could use a neutron bomb that just irradiates, a dirty bomb that irradiates the city and kills the people, but then it's radioactive for, 50 years and unusable. So China said the future wars that they're looking at are going to be biological, viral, mostly, and then robot wars, literally. We have Boston Dynamics. We have they have their equivalent, and these dogs with I'm not making this up, but dogs with laser beams on them and can target. It sounds like an Austin Powers movie, sharks with laser beams on their heads. But machine guns, and they can target very accurately and run about 25 miles per hour. And they're vicious. So war is going to take on a whole new shape for sure.
So the U.S. government has recognized this as a real thing for people, former agents, CIA agents, whatever, former diplomats. They're being taken care of medically for this, and they're being treated, correct?
Correct.
And the problem is no civilians are being treated for us. So two-part question. How are the diplomatic people being treated for it? How is it being recognized? How is the government specifically recognizing them?
So there's Havana Act that the Congress passed, and they
pull that thing a little bit.
It's published in the Federal Register, and they
turn that light on, Austin.
They listed. They didn't list the diagnostic criteria, but they said that a board-certified neurologist can diagnose it based on these methods: MRI, EEG. computer tomography. So neurological damage acquired due to hostile activity or something like that. The Havana abbreviation, that's what it stands for. There is no recognition from any government agency that it is happening domestically to either federal employees or civilians. And my case is a perfect example of it. I've been diagnosed. I have the same diagnosis. All the experts recognized it. They're all on the same page. The government would not investigate it, would not recognize it. And if it doesn't recognize it, it wouldn't investigate. It wouldn't protect me. It wouldn't protect other members of the general public. And that's the problem. That's the conversation that we need to have.
What kind of treatment are these former diplomats or former CIA agents getting for this?
As far as I understand, if their active attacks stopped, the treatment is very similar to post-traumatic brain injury. It's basically rehabilitation. In my case, I was recommended vestibular rehabilitation, and it simply doesn't work because I am being attacked every day. So I go to vestibular rehab and they say, you're worse than last time. I said, yeah, because I had several attacks in between. So my attacks are ongoing, and treating it is like putting a Band-Aid on a bleeding wound. It's just not going to happen. It's not helping. I'm getting progressively worse.
But it is helping the diplomats.
We don't know if their attack stopped because the reporting has been very obscure about it. There are some diplomats, for example, Mark Lindsay, him and his family were attacked in China, and then they were attacked in Philadelphia when they came to for treatment at their residence and at the hotel domestically. So overseas and domestically. So there are single cases where the diplomats, the federal employees were attacked both overseas and domestically. The Cuban diplomats, the reporting is rather obscure, but so your guess is as good as mine. I don't know if they stopped or if they continue, but they're receiving some kind of rehabilitation treatment.
Yeah, that would be an incredibly interesting question. I don't have access to those people to find that out, but imagine a knife wound, a stab wound, and you keep turning the knife. There's no way for the brain to heal. There's no way for this psychological scarring from all the breakdown scripts and torture to actually heal because it's continuous. It's a slow kill weapon in a way.
But the important thing to recognize is that our government has publicly acknowledged that this technology does exist and is being used outside of the United States, at least. They may not be recognizing it. They're recognizing that it's real, right? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a real weapon that our government has confirmed is being used by either by adversaries or by us against other adversaries, right?
Correct. They have not identified a weapon, but they have identified that it's a real thing from directed energy.
From directed energy. Just, we got to get to the point where they can recognize that it's being used in the domestic, inside our country right now.
Correct. How it's been delivered, who's behind it, why they're doing it, we all need to know. If I'm a non-consensual experimental subject for a newer weapon that's been delivered, which is my really most plausible hypothesis, because I don't see any foreign agents in Bloomingdale, Illinois, driving a van. I mean, obviously, this is not There's
happening. No guy doing a drive-by with holding a satellite dish out of his truck.
No.
Thank you guys very much for coming on here and talking about this. I really appreciate it, Len and Duncan.
Yeah. And again, thank you for having us. And we want people to look up Havana syndrome. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, why we're on here. and to ask your politicians to, and news agencies to look deeper into this. And until people are fully aware what Havana syndrome is, they're not going to understand the public's health issues that could occur. If it can happen to Len, it can happen to anybody. And so thank you again, Dan.
And Len, where can people find out more about you specifically and the talks that you do and find more of your work? And the same goes for you.
I'm on Twitter at P Sardonicus. That's my best.
Can you spell that?
PSARDONICUS.
Okay, I'll put a link so people can just click it. It's linked below. And Duncan.
Dr. Robert Duncan, PhD, DARPA, CIA, Targeted Individual Government Program whistleblower, has passed away. He was found dead in his home here recently, and it's quite a loss to the truth community, I guess you could say, because his books spoke a lot of truth, especially Project Soulcatcher. So this is Dr. Ann, the Substack. She received notice that Dr. Robert Duncan, CIA and DARPA whistleblower of the Government Civilian Targeting and Torture Program, as well as the supercomputer global human brain surveillance technology, was found deceased in his home. He wrote several books, including Soulcatcher, confirming that hacking of the human soul is possible and has been achieved. Soulcatcher is by far the most important book I've read to understand the depth of satanic surveilling and controlling the world, and how artificial intelligence, underground supercomputers, are used for remote assassination and torture programs.
I really tried my hardest to reach out to Robert Duncan and interview him, only to realize that he died last year in 2024. There's no information you can find on it. It's literally, they killed this guy because he was the best source of information that we had. If only he told us the rest of the information that he had in his head. I have compiled even more information than this. Simply go to sinisterstatic.com. It'll bring you to thedisclosurehub.com, the section of it that has all of the EMF stuff. It's all free to watch. As time goes on, this is going to get worse. I'm going to do my best to try to create some technology based off these patents, using AI to simplify the terms, to come up with some sort of technique to stop this stuff and to block these signals. This is crazy. This is insane. I'm aware, but it's true and it's real, and you need to incorporate it into your brain and into your life, so that way this becomes part of everyday conversation with everybody. Thank you for taking the time to watch this long video. Please share it with people, even though they probably won't watch it because it's 4 hours. It is probably one of the best videos to encompass all of the direct energy weapons and everything that they're actually doing to us to attack us and torture us. Who is they? That's the question, right? I'm GK with The Disclosure Hub. I have tons of free stuff for you. Check out thedisclosurehub.com, sinisterstatic.com, and I have so much more. It's all free, all for you. I'm doing this until I die. I hope you utilize my information.
Klingt komisch, ist aber so.
Also, ihr wisst schon Bescheid.
Denkt ihr nicht?
Abschalten.